Hello, everyone. Today I have Kim or K Fox with me today, and she's going to give us her top five books today. So, Kim, how about you start us off? How you doing?
Uh, Great, good. I actually had a pretty good reading year last year. I did do a lot of rereads of some old favorites, so I'm not going to be counting any of my rereads in my top five, or else it would all be Terry Pratchett's Discworld and then like Earthsea by Ursula Le Guin, because those are my two favorite series, and I read a lot of them both. um,
Yeah, I did Discworld all last year, and that was a
mhm.
that was a blast.
Yes, absolutely. All right. So, did you want me to like try to rank them or anything? It's kind of hard because one of them's nonfiction.
You could just give us the top, whatever order you want to
Okay.
do. As long as you got five books there, it's all good.
Okay. Okay. All right. I guess I'll start off with the nonfiction one then. So this one is it's called The Demon Haunted World, and it's by Carl Sagan. Carl Sagan is just one of my favorite people in general. He worked very hard to make science accessible to people. And I think that that's a very important goal to have. I think that it should be the goal of scientists, educators, communicators of any type. I'm very interested in that. And this book was kind of about that, as well as about the public's perception of science and how people at the time were growing in doubt about science and things like that. It was written in 1997, and reading it during the last couple years.
It's probably very reminiscent of what happened. And
Very,
yeah,
very, and so it was just a very powerful read for that reason, as well as it was just very interesting to get a perspective of a scientist who, I guess, to see the other side of it, because while I studied a lot of science in my degree and everything, it's not my job. It's not what I do for a living. And so while I love science and I'm very interested in it, I guess it's just really cool to see the perspective of someone who has done this for a living for their entire career and how they perceive the public perception of them. So yeah. Uh,
I seen someone who was working in one of the science fields. They made a post saying, I think I have a harder time dealing with giving proper information to the public because I'm constantly having to prove that my stuff is factual and exists.
yeah. Yeah, exactly, because there are these things like, the flat earth stuff that's become like surprisingly big, and all these sort of anti-science conspiracies where people
Which,
just don't trust science anymore. And it's kind of baffling, but I think that reading that book showed the buildup of it
yeah,
and showed a lot of how that happened and why that happened, and gives good advice and steps on how to fix that for everybody, for scientists, for teachers, for just you and me.
yeah.
So yeah,
I
it's
mean, like, you and I can't actually do proper scientific research. We don't have the funds, we don't have the equipment. The
mm-mm.
best we can do is information research. And
Mm-hmm.
that information has to be, contextually based and factual, and you have to find it and also source it, which takes a lot of time in itself.
Mm-hmm.
And I find a lot of people want a quick and easy
Yeah.
answer. And that's just, the part of it that makes it a little bit more difficult is it takes a little bit more
Yeah.
easy answer.
Yeah.
We don't have all the answers. We're human. We, have to learn as we go for most of us.
Yeah.
So, it's going to take time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
what's your second book you got?
So the second one I'm going to mention is going to be The Found and the Lost by Ursula Le Guin. It is a collection of her novellas. So I feel like I'm cheating a little bit because it's a collection, but
Hey,
um,
short story collections are
yeah.
always great, especially when they're bound up and
Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, I have it bound up over there, but um, but um, so Ursula Le Guin is my second favorite author of all time, and she just has a way with words and a way with language that she can be writing about like a blade of grass and suddenly you feel for it. Like there's literally, I can't remember if it was a novella in this one or a short story in a different one because I also read her short story collection earlier this year and I had to choose between them. I think I like the novellas better, but there's a story that's literally written from the perspective of a tree. And like you feel for that tree, like you empathize with this tree that she wrote about, and she's just so incredible. And she writes just regular fiction, sort of contemporary fiction, I guess, or um, literary fiction. I don't know, I'm bad at genres. But she also writes science fiction and fantasy, and so there are aspects of all of those in this collection.
yeah.
But yeah.
So, yeah, I've heard her. She's the Earthsea
Yep,
author, right?
she's the Earthsea. Yep.
And I have heard from many people, including you before, that Earthsea is something I should definitely take a look into.
Yes.
Um,
Earthsea, and I think that you would like some of her science fiction. I think that you would really like The Left Hand of Darkness,
okay,
and I think you would like The Dispossessed as well.
interesting.
But yeah.
Those are things I'll have to take a look into.
hmm
And what you got
But
there for
yes.
your number 3 book?
All right. So the remaining ones are all fantasy books because I
Hey,
mostly read fantasy. So for number 3, I'm going to say The Heir of Navran, which is actually a bind up as well, but it's the conclusion of the Rayur Revelation series.
yes.
Um, and basically, the entire Rayur Revelation series is kind of like, have you seen Road to El Dorado, the cartoon?
Yes.
So, you know the two main characters, Miguel and Tulio? If you take them, make them generally more competent, and you throw them in a fantasy world, then you kind of that's what Write Your Revelations is
Okay.
about. Like the first, like it's about them, like they're thieves for hire, and it's about them just going through all, like muddling through all these adventures. It's very swashbuckling. It's kind of got some like cheesy cliches, but it doesn't take itself seriously, and so it's just a very fun series. So my third book is the conclusion to that series, The Heir of Navran, because the series itself was just so fun and so fast paced and so just a joy to get through that when I cried several times in this book, I was like, why am I crying? This is supposed to be fun. And I was like, I am
Be-
having fun, but I'm also crying.
because the payoff is so good.
It was so good. And so yes, I can't say a whole lot about the plot because it's the final book in the series, but
That's fair.
yes, it blew me away. I loved it so much. Right.
That's the one thing is like when a story
Mhm.
gives you such an amazing conclusion, one that you just
Mhm.
feel deeply, it can like do
Yes.
so much for everything that preceded it.
Yes.
Like,
Yes.
and even if everything that preceded it is amazing, like it can
Mhm.
amplify all that for you as well.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And it's actually really fun because I am rereading it on audio with my boyfriend now, and he's listening to it for the first time. And I'm like sitting here and I'm like picking up on so much more. I'm like, he left a hint for that thing right here in front of me. And I'm so mad. It's so good. It's so good. So yes, Write Your Revelations is it was a wonderful adventure.
Tight.
Yes,
Excellent.
absolutely.
All right.
All right.
Next
So
book.
book number 4 is the first book of Malazan, however they say it, Gardens of the Moon. Um, I
Steve Erickson,
really,
right?
yep, yeah, Erickson. I really enjoyed this one because, and I think a lot of people talk about how confusing it is at first and how it's a little bit hard to get a grasp on. I think that if you read a lot of, especially um, older sci-fi, then you might not have that much of an issue because um, I really enjoy Ursula Le Guin, obviously, and then I also really like Philip K. Dick, and they
Okay, yeah.
both tend to just throw you in. They like it.
I hope you can
You don't know
swim.
what's happening. Yeah, exactly. You don't know what's happening, but you're having fun and it's great and you're gonna figure it out. And that's kind of how I felt with Gardens of the Moon. And I have never felt that way before about a fantasy book. And so between Erickson's prose, which were actually quite lovely, he the way that he shaped the story without spoon feeding you, like it just made me feel like I was reading a sci-fi book, which I guess it's just an aspect that I really love about sci-fi.
Sci-fi is so
And
fun.
mhm, it is. And something that I actually don't talk about in my reviews a lot because it's a kind of it's kind of silly. I don't like exposition. I don't like when the author explains things to me. I don't like it. Like I can sit there and I can like be reading and I can be like, wow, that's some really well done exposition. But it takes me out of the story almost immediately. And so the way that Stevenson just like, hits the road running, or Erickson, not Stevenson, Steve Erickson, um, just like hits the road running, just really appealed to me because I'm like, yeah, I can figure this out. I can figure this out on my own. Thank you for trusting me to figure this out.
Yeah.
I didn't figure a lot of things out in the end, but you know what? It was book one of a series. And
Yeah.
so,
You're probably going to pick up a whole lot more as you go along. And I actually
exactly.
heard that Malzahn or Malzahn, whatever, however it's
Mhm.
pronounced,
Yeah.
is actually one of the most rereadable fantasy series that exists.
Yes,
So
I've heard that as well.
that's pretty interesting to see how that's going to play out.
Yes, yes. But yes, I really enjoyed book one and like I finished it and I was just so excited to continue the series. So, yes, that is the fourth one. And then the fifth one is Grace of Kings.
Okay.
And that's by Ken. I don't remember if it's Ken Liu or Ken Liu, but um, but it is the first book of a fantasy series called the Dandelion Dynasty.
Okay.
And that one was really interesting because it had a lot of political maneuvering and it had a lot of sort of interpersonal relationship dynamics, but it also had sort of larger scale war tactic talk.
Okay.
And it did a pretty good job of balancing all three aspects. So while I knew what was happening with the countries and the armies and the politics, and I knew what these political figures, like what their goals were and who they were, I also knew that this political figure here, like I knew the history of how he met his wife and how and like I enjoyed the stories and I felt for them. So it wasn't just like, oh, look at this figurehead over here. You know, it was like, oh, that's a human person that has all these relationships and ties. And this is another human person. And I don't know who I want to win. And so
So many characters.
exactly. Exactly. So many characters and so many characters that I felt so much for.
See,
Um,
feel like that sounds very reminiscent of A Song of Ice and Fire, where you have an
Yes.
entire spectrum of characters and you can
Mhm.
enjoy all of them, or just certain ones, things
Mhm.
like that. And
Yeah.
when you got a cast that big, being
Mhm.
able to kind of like hop onto each person's storyline and
Mhm.
enjoy what they're doing is very,
Mhm.
so,
Yeah.
and especially the character growth, or you know the ability that any of them could be vulnerable or die at any moment.
Yes.
That's
Yes.
the other great thing about a very large cast of characters is if they start killing off three or four of them here and there,
Yeah.
you're
Then
not losing a whole lot, but
mhm.
depending on the character and how much you're attached to said character,
Exactly.
it could
Yeah.
mean a whole lot to the reader.
Absolutely. Like this, like I said, this is just book one of the Dandelion Dynasty, and I am nervous to pick up the next book because I'm like, there are certain people who better not die as I keep reading. We'll see. But yes, it's I definitely recommend it, especially if you do like political maneuverings like Game of Thrones. I haven't read A Song of Ice and Fire myself, but I imagine it's similar. If you like the Long Price Quartet, I have read the first book of that one, and it kind of reminded me of that.
Okay.
Hmm.
Did you ever read Malice?
I have not read Malice.
They're good ones to get it onto.
Yep, it's definitely on my list. It's definitely on my list. I'm gonna try this year. My goal is more to continue series than to start new ones. So
That's
I'm
a
gonna
good
try to
goal.
continue and finish some series before starting new series.
That is also my goal.
We'll see
I
how
am
that goes.
doing very good with the Wheel of Time. So.
That's good. Yes, yes. The Wheel of Time I'm sticking with. Ma- Malazan, I have picked up the second book, so I'm getting there.
Awesome. Well,
uh,
thank you so much for sharing your books.
yeah, of course.
And
Thank you for
it's
having me.
it's been wonderful because so far with everyone that I've interviewed,
Hmm.
there hasn't been many repeats. So it's been really great getting to get a
That's
really
exciting.
good span of different titles to offer everyone to go and check out and see if they're interested. So,
Yeah, that's good. I
um,
look forward to seeing what everyone else says.
well, it's going to be fun.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, you have yourself a great day and thank you.
You too. Thank you. Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Knickknack's Corner. This time I get to interview Knickknack and Nick gets to talk about his top 5 books. So, Nick, do you want to get started?
Sure. I'm going to start with my number one favorite book of all time, to a surprise of no one at all. The Lord of the Rings.
What a
It
shock.
is, to me, the best book of all time. And like I said, to me, everyone else can have their own favorites. This one is
Mhm.
mine, and it's special to me. So I absolutely love the series. Tolkien gave us something that I don't think the world really got to see much of beforehand. We got to see an entire love for story, song, history, sagas, all that sort of stuff throughout his work. But Lord of the Rings, that trilogy just hit me at that right time in life that it kind of consumed my brain and made me a fan,
Mhm.
even to this day. And I've read the book 30 plus times, let's call it, because it's way more than 30. I don't know how many, but it's a lot. Read it a
Yeah.
lot. And I read it again last year, which was so good. Absolutely just like brought me back into Tolkien stuff. So I've read
Mhm.
2 Tolkien books this year, and there's going to be more to come this year.
That's exciting.
Yeah, and I,
Yeah.
I think almost everyone, pretty much everyone is who reads fantasy is oftentimes a Tolkien fan, uh,
Mhm.
on
Mhm.
some level.
I think that even if they don't enjoy his works, they appreciate it because he has had such a massive influence on everything that has come after as far as fantasy goes.
Well, I mean, even if you can't appreciate what he's done, you have to give the man props for what he built because it was
Mhm.
quite something. The history, he's got books that he has an entire series called The History of Middle Earth that is literally
Mhm.
just notes and letters and stories,
Mhm.
everything about Middle Earth from the beginning of when his world was created to,
Mhm.
the end that we,
Yeah.
so absolutely love that. But I will stop talking about Tolkien because we talk Tolkien lots on this channel and we will do more later. But my second book is The Only Good Indians by Stephen Graham Jones.
Mhm.
I decided to dig heavily into horror in the past few years as I find the books to be really great for kind of just picking them up and putting them down because they're
Mhm.
usually fast paced. They're, you know, different than fantasy. I find fantasy has a very large burnout factor.
Yes.
Once you read big book after big book after big book, you need something to go in between that. So I find horror is a great substitute in between.
Mhm.
And when I read this book, I was absolutely blown away. It spoke to me on so many levels, and the horror in it is
Mhm.
probably my favorite instance in usage of horror I've ever read.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I absolutely loved it. And I recommend this book to everyone. But now that he has the book out, My Heart is a Chainsaw, I
Mhm.
oftentimes push people towards that for the first time reading Stephen Graham Jones because it flows a lot better than this one does. But
Mhm.
this one, to me, is the better story.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Excellent.
Have you read any Stephen Graham Jones yet? Or?
I have not. The Only Good Indians has been on my TBR for a while. It's one of those ones where I'm kind of waiting for either like a really good Kindle sale or something like that where I can kind of just get my hands on a copy. But I might just look in my library and see if I can get a copy from the library.
He is fastly growing to be like my
Hmm.
favorite modern author. Like
Okay.
I would say Stephen King is my favorite modern author at the moment
Hmm.
because Tolkien is sort of like almost a classic, but not. Uh,
Hmm. Hmm.
but King, living author, I guess is the way to say it. Um,
Hmm.
Stephen King is kind of sitting there, but Stephen Graham Jones is creeping up and getting very
Hmm.
good.
Okay.
I still have a few books by him to read, which could also improve my opinion on
Hmm.
that. And I know he's got
Hmm.
a new book coming out next year. Also looking
Okay.
forward to that. So he is an awesome author that if he puts something out, I'm going to get it.
Hmm. Okay.
So for my third book, as I was just
Hmm.
stating, Stephen King,
Hmm.
he is my favorite living author at the moment. And
Hmm.
when did I started this channel 2 or 3 years ago?
Hmm.
And one of the first books I read was it. And
Hmm.
it put me into this big spiraling rabbit hole of Stephen King, where I have gone on a crazy binge of reading this guy's work. And
Hmm.
I absolutely love what he does. There are times when I shake my head at him because he's out there,
Yeah, out
but there are
there.
other times that he has pure genius. And this book
Yes.
here is pure genius.
It's
Now,
definitely one that I'm very interested in.
so if someone's like, I've never read Stephen King before and I want to read a book of his, the first question I'll ask is it okay if it's long? And if the answer is yes, I hand them the
Yeah.
book. Because it
Mhm.
doesn't matter what you're into. If you don't like horror, this is not horror. It's a
Mhm.
romance, time travel, espionage book.
Mhm.
Essentially, it's about trying to stop JFK's assassination. So
Mhm.
you go back in time and you're there for, I believe, 5 years, which is lots of time to fall in love with a person. And also, they're spying on Lee Harvey Oswald. That's all you need to know about the story. The rest of it
Mhm.
falls into place amazingly. He has good call outs to his other works. And this book just gives you so many interesting instances and thoughts on time travel that goes with the actual time that they were in. And I
Okay.
could not put this book down. And I still, to this day, feel like it is his best work. I don't think he has a better book out there that I could just give or recommend to every person. I think
Mhm.
that is the every person Stephen King book.
Okay.
Um, if I was to choose probably my favorite, most effective book by him, it would be Pet Cemetery. But Pet Cemetery is, it's fantastic in its own right, but it's not as good as 11/22/63.
Okay.
In the style of his writing. I feel like
Mhm.
1163 was his epicenter of his best writing. Um,
Okay.
Pet Cemetery is very pulpy. It
Mhm.
doesn't necessarily represent his best writing, but it
Mm.
has, in my opinion, his most effective story.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or my fourth book
Okay.
is The Poppy War by R.F. Did you get to read
Yep.
this one with us?
I've read the first one. I have not read the rest of the series, but I have read the first one and I really enjoyed the first one.
The whole series is like the first one.
Okay. Okay.
Each
So,
book, I would say, is as good as the last. I wouldn't
okay.
say that each book is better than the last. They're all equally as good, and that's saying something because the Poppy War is freaking
Mhm.
amazing.
It
Um,
was phenomenal.
it is 20th century China based fantasy, and pretty much people can call some people, mind you, can call
Mhm.
gods down to inhabit their body to fight wars with. All you need to know, it's a
Mhm.
crazy, crazy, crazy book. Um,
Mhm.
it starts off feeling YA-ish, and then it moves
Mhm.
into dark fantasy very quickly.
Mhm.
So definitely go into it, check it out. The entire trilogy is amazing, and it's a complete series.
Mhm.
So read it. They're fast paced. They're not even big books. Like what is
Mhm.
it? 520 pages.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like you could burn through that in no time. For my next trick,
All right.
my final book on the list here is The Rage of Dragons by Evan Winter. Now, I believe, and maybe you can tell me if you agree with this, if you
Mhm.
like the movie Gladiator and you like dragons, this is a book you'll probably enjoy.
Maybe.
I know you are not a fan, and that's
I
okay.
I also love Gladiator and dragons.
But let's be fair, Tao is
Mhm.
an idiot.
Yes, absolutely.
He
If
is
if
not
if
likable.
you yes. Yeah, I was gonna say if you like Gladiator dragons and you're okay with unlikable protagonists, then
Yeah. Like
then
it
yes.
so the character in this, you didn't read Fires of Vengeance, did you?
No.
So he fixes Tao in the Fires of Vengeance.
Okay.
Tao is a much better character in that story. And that
Okay.
story also progresses forward and is,
Mhm.
I would say, written as well. Although there is no sex scenes in that, and this would have had a pretty cringy sex scene in it, I will say.
Yeah.
Um, this book here, I really enjoyed. It was a great getting your feet off the ground
Mm.
essence of a book for the start of a
Mhm.
series. Uh,
Yeah.
I really enjoyed the battles he put in here. I believe
Mhm.
that some of like the one-on-one fights that happen within this book are
Mhm.
probably even some of the most well-written ones I've read in fantasy.
Mhm.
There are a lot of strong points to this book, and there are some weak points to the book,
Mhm.
but it's one of my favorites, and I am entirely looking forward to him finishing the series. He's got the third book in the series coming out this year, and it's
That's
called
exciting.
Lord of Demons.
Oh wow.
So, do you remember when they were talking about how they control the dragons in this book here?
Mhm.
How has that ability with demons?
Oh wow.
So that
Okay.
comes up in Fires of Vengeance, and There's
Okay.
also, we're going to see what's going to come up in the third book. So,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it's only supposed to be a quartet.
Okay.
So
Wow.
there's only two
Yeah.
more books to come. And if you ever get the chance and you see this book and you have Google Lens on your phone, Google Lens the cover, the dragon flies off the cover, fire comes up and everything. And
That's
if you
cool.
Google Lens the back of the book, Evan Winter pops up and talks about why he wrote the book.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Wow. That's
it's
really
really
cool.
interesting. Evan Winter, I find, is one of those authors that people should be looking out for. He's
Mm-hmm.
going to do great things. If
I
this is his,
absolutely agree.
because this is his first book.
Mm-hmm.
This is your first novel. The first thing you give me,
Mm-hmm.
I fully expect the rest of your stuff to be good. And
Absolutely.
Fires of Vengeance, I found, was a book that increased in how well he wrote it. He did
Okay.
a good job at, like, he amended Tao,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
because I feel like that was the weakest part of Rage of Dragons, is
Mm-hmm.
Tao is not a very likable character,
Mm-hmm.
and there was sort of a forced relationship almost within it. It seemed
Mm-hmm.
like it wasn't natural, but like when you
Yeah.
get into the second book, it feels natural. It all flows better, and you can
Okay.
see he improved his craft.
Mm-hmm.
So I think as he goes on, it's gonna get better. So something to look for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And while I personally didn't necessarily enjoy Rage of Dragons a whole lot, I think that Evan Winters did a wonderful job with what he was trying to do. I think that he executed things very well. And I think that his intention was almost to to make the reader angry at times with how hard-headed Tao could be.
Or the
And it
terrible
just
decisions he made.
exactly. And it was just too much for me. But I think he did a wonderful job, and I'm definitely looking forward to seeing where he goes. And I definitely would love to pick up something else that he writes maybe after this series. Who
Yeah,
knows?
I'm just excited to see. He's so good, and
Mhm.
I'm really enjoying what he's done.
Mhm.
So
That's
yeah, like, these are my five favorite books that I've read, like, for a long, long time.
good.
Tolkien
Mhm.
has been since I was a teenager, like young
Mhm.
teenager. Stephen King has been like in the past 3 years. Poppy War has been in the last 2 years. The Only Good
Mhm.
Indians was last year, and Evan
Mhm.
Winter was a year or two ago. So,
Mhm.
everyone's been building up and kind of sticking in my favorites. Like, they've been there
Mhm.
for a long time, and
Yeah.
they're ones I'm excited to read more of.
Mhm.
And actually, we're going to be reading Empire Vampire next month.
Mhm.
And I'm excited to see if Jay Kristoff is going to be able to make the list. And
I'll be curious to see. I'll be curious to see how everybody responds to that. Yes.
well, Kim, thank you so much for interviewing me for my top five.
Of course. Thank you for letting me take control of your video.
No problem. We'll do it again sometime for a Tolkien talk. How's that sound?
Sounds great.
Thanks, everyone. Bye. Hey, everyone. Welcome. Today we have Nanu, who has opted not to be on screen, which is a fair thing to do. And she is going to give us her top five books of all time. And we're going to cover that. And I will put pictures right over here of the books that she is speaking about. And you guys can go check those out and enjoy. So, Nanu, go ahead with your top book there, or number five, I guess.
Well, these are in no particular order, but I'll go in the order I read them. So the first one I found out was the Saga of the Borderlands. The first one is called The Days of the Beer, sorry. It's a fantasy trilogy by Nicholasarudolph, and she's usually called the Tolkien of Argentina because she took all of the myths and folk tales from all of the American natives, and she made them into this amazing epic fantasy where you have to go through all of America and visit all of their cultures and defeat the bad guy. So this one is my first favorite book that I ever read, and I was like, oh my god, I need to read more books. So it's amazing.
Just sounds really interesting, to be honest.
I always bug everyone to read them. I don't know how good the English translation is because, I read it in Spanish, but it's so good. It's amazing because when you read fantasy, you're usually used to the same tropes because it's usually European fantasy. But these ones, you can read them, and even though she didn't take them like verbatim, I think is the word, you can see the inspiration by the Mayas and the Aztecs and the Welches, and you can see how she took all of our rich history and myths and poured them into a book, and they are amazing. I could talk about this one a lot, but I don't want to give spoilers, so that's all I'm going to say.
Perfect. That actually sounds really interesting. And I also have been leaning away from European fantasy a lot. Just because I do find that European fantasy is the main setting for a lot of fantasy, 9 times out of 10. And I just want something a little bit different. So I did find like Evan Winter's The Burning and R.F. Kuang's Poppy War trilogy. Those were a couple instances on my end of things that I found really dove into different cultures, which brings new interest and vigor into fantasy. So that would be very interesting, and I definitely am going to have to look out for those.
You should. I'd send them to you, except that I have never seen a paperback version in English because I haven't. But if I ever do, I'll send them to you so you can enjoy them.
Oh no, I'm going to be hunting for them, so don't you worry.
They are so great.
Go ahead with your fourth book there.
Then I discovered The Neverending Story.
Ooh, yeah.
My mom did this newspaper collection that came with books, and this one was amazing. My cover, as you can see in the picture, it's blue. It doesn't say anything. It doesn't tell you it's a fantasy story. It doesn't tell you it's about a kid. It's just this very serious book. So when I got it, I was very intrigued by what would be so never-ending about this. And I think these two that I'm talking about, I think I've read them at least once every 2 years ever since I discovered them, and they are so good. And this one is one of my favorites because it's got two very clearly divided parts, the adventure part and then the growing up part. And as I grow up, I still find little gems inside, so I think it's amazing. And my version has beautiful illustration as well.
Oh, now have you seen the movie?
No, I haven't, because that one is older than me. And when I went to watch it, I watched a trailer on YouTube, I think.
Yeah.
And I found the dragon to be so weird, the puppet, that I never.
Looking, eh?
Yeah, I never dared watch the movie, but I do love the book. And I think the second part is usually like people don't talk so well about the second part. And I think it's my favorite because you get to visit more of Fantasia, but it's also so great to learn how to grow up and how to do stuff. So I thought it was amazing.
I highly recommend the movie. It was one of those movies that I watched as a child, and it got me very interested in fantasy at a young age. It is a little cheesy, but there are moments in that movie that are absolutely phenomenal. And I'm sure you
want to cry with it when the horse goes into the.
I was just gonna say the scene with Ajax is pretty rough to watch. It was a moment in my childhood that I will never forget.
Yeah,
Uh,
that I cry every time I read it in the book. It's like, oh no.
I have
So,
been trying to find the book, and I'm actually having a hard time getting my hands on it. But when I do, I am going to be reading it because it's one that I've been very interested in, and I did not know it was a book first before it was ever a movie. So uh, I need to get my hands on it.
it's so fun. It's so good. Here is everywhere, and there is always a new version or new illustrations. So I get it for everyone. I love it.
Let's move on to your third book there.
So my third book is Pride and Prejudice. I think it's one of the first classics I ever read. Not my first romance, but my first classic. And I thought it was so good.
I have only
Um,
read Pride and Prejudice and Zombies,
I
which
only watched
is
the movie for that one.
essentially Pride and Prejudice with zombies added in. Um, I enjoyed it very much. I don't know much about the original of it. I have it, and I should probably read it at some point. Yeah, I have it down there, so I should read that at some point. Just the original without the zombies, but it she does an amazing job for writing for classic literature because sometimes classic literature is written in a way that's not accessible. And I found that she made her writing to be extremely accessible while watching it.
Yeah. The thing I love the most is that everybody talks about this book as a romance, but the focus is never on the romance. It's mostly on society and how you navigate it. And she has very witty remarks about people and how things work and propriety and all those things. So she's great because she always makes me laugh. I've read many books by her, but this one is still my favorite. And I love that. I love that she critiques everyone and looks at how people talk and get introduced and fall in love and what it's like to be a woman in that age. And she understands that the most awkward moments aren't the ones with tragedies or anything, are just the small little things in life, like it's raining and you're wet and somebody's talking to you and you just want to get home.
Yes.
She
Yes,
gets those
100 times.
moments. There is another one, it's not this one, but there is another book by her where the protagonist is more of an introverted woman, and she shows how social interactions can be so draining as well. So she's very witty, and the romance is great because Mr. Darcy, of course, is awesome, and so is Lizzie. But she introduced me to classics where they didn't need to be dry. They just could be witty and they could show things about normal life and how things went. So I've
Absolutely.
got I've got first time I read it in Spanish, and now I got the collector's version, so I'm quite happy about that.
Have you read both versions?
Yes, I also did audiobook on LibriVox because it's free, and there are a couple of versions that are just the greatest quality, and I love them even more because you can
So my
hear the
question
voices.
is, was there a difference between the translations for you?
No,
No.
but I'll be honest, I have been speaking English and Spanish for so long that sometimes I remember things that I read in English in Spanish and the other way around. So I am not good at judging translations.
That makes sense. I understand that. So let's move to your second book there, or fourth, whichever one we're on.
So that one would be American Gods by Neil Gaiman.
That one is phenomenal.
Yes. It's not my favorite book by him, I don't think, but it's the one that if I had to choose one to keep, I'd keep this one because I
So
found the
funny.
book amazing.
So funny. The whole book is just phenomenal. He is an amazing author that just kind of really gives you some meat to work with for a story. Like, I absolutely loved the puns and God information in the books. Little jokes like it's thundering and lightning outside, and you got Wednesday there and everything. So good. I I really enjoyed the whole story myself. Yeah, so
Yeah, it's one of my favorites because the little stories, the main story I have a few thoughts about, but the God stories that you have in between, I think they are brilliant.
they're amazing. You can tell he's
So
done his homework on like different deities too, because he puts so much into so little words that gives you so much about these gods.
yeah, he's. I don't want to give spoilers to say why I love it so much, but it's just perfect. And it has moments where you laugh a lot and characters I hate. So it was
Like,
really
the
fun.
god of death, I'm not a fan of him, but at times he's hilarious.
The one character I hate the most is Laura.
Yes,
Every time she showed up, my face would change.
she constantly made me angry throughout the entire book, but at the same time, I couldn't see that book without her.
I guess that makes sense. I still hate her.
That's fair.
But apart from her, the one character that had me intrigued for quite a while was I don't remember his name. He was the man in the town when Shadow stays in a wintry town.
Oh, yes. Yes, yes.
He was not the librarian, he was something else, but I read it a couple of years ago and
Are
I
you
don't
talking
remember
about the police chief?
No, I'm talking about the man with the very big last name.
Oh, yes. I know who you're talking about. I don't remember the name.
I want to say Helsinki, but I know it was not Helsinki. It's just for some reason I'm thinking of a map now.
Scratching my head for it, not sure.
Oh, in Lakeside, that was the town. I've got the book near me, so I'm looking at it. But anyways, that guy.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, that's my cat asking for pets.
And what is your final book on the docket there?
My final book is one I read about a year ago, and it blew my mind. It was my second book by Kurt Vonnegut. I don't know how to pronounce his name, but this guy, the guy that wrote Slaughterhouse-Five.
Okay.
And it's called The Sirens of Titan. It's amazing. And it has so many twists and turns that you just can't picture. Be quiet. So it starts with these three characters that are important. That is a wife and a husband. The wife is sort of a widow, and the husband is an astronaut. Well, that word.
Yeah, astronaut.
This is my second language, so be patient. He ended up going to a point in space between Mars and Earth, but it's a weird point. So now he lives in space, like his entire being is like miles and miles. No, not miles. Astronomic units long, and it goes like through the entire galaxy. And he shows up in his house like twice a month, I think, or once a month. Oh. And so he can talk to people, he can talk to his wife, but he doesn't receive visitors. And that's how he starts. The book starts with him receiving a visitor, which is this guy called Malachi, who's a very rich guy, and he doesn't know why he's being summoned, but everybody wants to know what's going on. And from there, it goes crazy. A lot of things happen, and the ending is very unexpected. Vonnegut is really good at showing how war can affect you.
Just 1 second there, Nanu. Hey, Nanu, do you want to start with your first or fifth book, whatever one this is, the last one?
Yeah, this one is called The Science of Titan by Kurt Vonnegut, and it's amazing. It's so full of twists and turns, and I got it so I can read you the blurb because it's so full of spoilers if I told you what I like about the story. So I'm just going to tell you it's about this guy who's an astronaut, and his spacecraft goes into, this is a made up word, so be patient, chronosynclastic infundibulum.
Oh,
So that thing converts him into pure energy, and he only materializes when his waveforms intercept Earth or some other planet.
okay.
And he can only go home once every month and a half, almost 2 months, and for only an hour. And he never receives visitors or anything. His wife lives in the mansion, and she never receives people either, and she doesn't talk about him. So you're very curious to know what happened with him and what happened with everyone. And for the first time, he receives a visitor. That's how the book starts. And this visitor is a guy that is like a super rich guy. And he doesn't know why he's going there or what's going to happen. He just knows that this guy knows everything that has ever happened or will ever happen. And now he wants to talk to him.
Oh, that sounds really
So
interesting. It also even sounds very similar to the premise of the book Foe by Ian Reid. I don't know if you've read that one yet or not, but
no,
it has a very, from what you're describing, it sounds very similar-esque to that.
I don't think it does because this is how it starts, but I can assure you this only lasts like 2 chapters because your
Oh,
whole
okay.
world is turned upside down like every 2 or 3 chapters.
Oh, okay, then definitely not the same. Maybe the beginning premise of it sounds very similar to what Foe is, because that one is about a rich guy showing up to offer someone to go on a expensive journey, and his life does get turned upside down and changes quite rapidly. Um, it was an interesting book, but this one sounds also very interesting. So, is this a sci-fi classic book?
Yes, it's part of my SF Masterworks collection.
Okay, so that is something that I need to get my hands on and read, because that sci-fi masterwork collection has some really interesting titles in there.
I've been getting them as they show up in my bookstores. And I have about 15 of them. And every time I grab one, it just blows my mind.
My
This one in
father
particular,
told me to read the book Bring the Jubilee, which is a sci-fi classic.
I never heard of that one.
Yeah, so that'll be one that I'm gonna look out for too. So I gotta definitely pay attention to that.
I got a few books that I never knew existed just because they were from this collection,
Mhm.
like this one,
Yeah.
which I knew nothing about as I grabbed it. So it's so weird because I'm finding so many great books that are like 50, 60 years old that I never heard about.
Yeah, there's all kinds of books that are buried under the weight of time.
Yeah, I'm happy about this collection. I need to get more. But the day I can, I'm just going to order them in bulk from abroad. Just bring them home. But this one in particular is amazing because the whole book you're wondering what's going on or what's the end game. And by the end, you'll have opinions about why everything was about. I can't say because if I say it's a spoiler, it's a big one. But it keeps you on your toes, and it blew my mind because I never knew what was going to happen. And every time I thought, oh, maybe this happens, something else happened, and it threw me for a loop again.
Yeah.
And somebody here in my first page says it's a very funny novel about the meaningless of it all by David Pringle from the 100 Best Novels of Science Fiction. I am assuming that's a magazine or something. But I think that quote is perfect to show why I love this book so much.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming here and giving us your top 5 books. I appreciate it.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for listening to me.
Oh, no problem. We'll definitely be doing more of these in the future. So I appreciate it. And thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hey everyone, welcome today. I have someone from my Discord, Weaver of the Wheel. So Weaver is going to give us his top 5 books of all time. And you go ahead with your first one there.
So I mean, if we're starting from the bottom, my fifth favorite book of all time is A Game of Thrones by George R. R. Martin.
Excellent.
So this is the most recent book on here. I read it 2020, and that was kind of where I was transitioning from reading like mostly young adult, middle grade to adult, and this was one of the, I would say that this is the book that really like cemented that. And I mean, I do still read like YA and that kind of thing a lot, but this was really the first kind of book like that I had read. And I mean, I had the same experience that a lot of people have with this book, and it was brutal and it was shocking, and main characters like POV characters dying left and right, and
Yeah.
I mean, it just really felt like something new for me.
It was actually new for everyone who read that. It's a different kind of fantasy book all
Yeah.
on its own. And they are pretty amazing, the A Song of Ice and Fire books. That one there, I would say, is probably one of the best entries of any fantasy series going, like, for a book one. It's
Yeah.
phenomenal. Like, almost flawless, I would say.
Yeah, and it also really helped that although I had friends who had read this series, like I went in like completely unspoiled for anything. I'd never seen the show or anything. So yeah, and I'm currently in the middle of the fourth book in this series, and I mean, really, I mean, this series is just amazing.
There's so much going on.
Yeah,
There's going to be something there for everyone.
yeah.
So what's your next book you got on the docket?
So my next book here is the only science fiction book here, and that is Ready Player One by Ernest Cline. Um, this was really special for me because I read it the year the movie was coming out, and I read it together with all my friends. And I love classic rock 80s music. I have an Atari, so like all these references, like I understood them, and I just thought it was the coolest thing ever. And Wade is, he's an underdog, and um I mean, I think that's kind of a story that everyone really likes. And in this kind of setting, I mean, it's just amazing. I cannot say the same for the sequel that I did not like, but
As
this,
you know,
yeah.
I work in a bookstore,
Mhm.
and we have people who are head over heels for Ready Player One, and they hear there's a Ready Player Two, and they're like, I need to get that book. But we have 2 people on staff who have read Ready Player Two, and they will honestly tell them, don't do it.
Yeah, this has a completely satisfying ending on its own.
Yeah.
Do not ruin your view of
Right?
this world with the sequel. I went through the trouble of finding a signed edition because I love the first one so much. And yeah,
Yeah. Well, hopefully he comes out with some more stuff and doesn't just piggyback off of that, like,
our
because good author.
Armada was pretty decent as well.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So go ahead there with your third book.
So my third book, it does not have a dust jacket or anything, but it is The Boys Who Challenged Hitler by Philip Hughes. And this is a nonfiction book about World War II, obviously. It's not a very well-known story, but it's kind of the story of this group of Danish teens, and Denmark was kind of neutral for most of the war,
Mhm.
and but like there were still like a lot of Germany had like kind of half taken over the country, but it wasn't like violent or anything. So really they were really embarrassed by the way that all the adults in their country had, handled this, because they were seeing like I think it was like the Polish people and I want to say Norwegian, although I can't, I'm not sure.
It was
And
Finnish. Sorry.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And I mean, it's just really an inspiring story about how they created, well, the Churchill Club, and they took on all kinds of, like, they sabotaged things, and they stole weapons. Like, I mean, it's just a crazy story. And like, I remember just randomly finding this in a bookstore when I was on vacation in Maine, and I like devoured it in like a couple of days. Like the main character, I'm probably gonna butcher his name here, but I think it's pronounced Nud Pedersen. Um, he was just like as a kid, like this guy was like super inspiring. He was like a hero to me. Like the way like he showed how like like kids can actually have an impact, and like they can actually like do stuff.
Yes.
So that was very cool for me to see, and I love World War II history. So yeah,
There's a lot of interesting stuff. It was a pretty prominent time
yeah.
in modern history with a lot of stuff happening all at once.
Yeah.
So, what is your book number 2?
Okay, so I think you might be familiar with this book. I'm not. This might be a kind of cheating, but The Lord of the Rings.
Hey, that's fair. I did that too myself. So,
Yeah, I consider it one story, even though I read it in like 3 parts.
most certainly.
Yeah. And I mean, I've never seen the movies all the
What?
way through. Yeah. Um, I've never seen the third and like half of the second, so I've definitely got to do that, especially considering how high up this is. But I mean,
Absolutely.
yeah, I mean, I love fantasy, obviously, and I mean, is there any better example of fantasy than the Lord of the? There isn't anything really. Like,
There's nothing that quite compares. There's a lot of things that try to be. There's a lot of things that have stemmed or grown from the ideas of Lord of the Rings. And of course, there's always been the sagas and mythology that came long before Lord of the Rings that, they did them well, but whatever Tolkien did, he did it masterfully.
yeah, and it took me a long time to get to this because all of my friends had read it at this point, and I read The Hobbit at this point, and I love The Hobbit, but this is, I mean, The Fellowship of the Ring's my favorite of the three, and this one is not hard, was never hard for me to get through. I think my first try I was able to read it. Like, I think I've read this like 3 times, but the one that always stopped me from finishing the series was The Two Towers. This one, for whatever reason, it's a good book, but it was, I feel like it was just such a jump, and like the world expanded so much more. It was like a lot to handle when I was like, I don't know, like
It's
9,
the
right?
first time that the book gets split into sections.
Yeah.
So it's got a different tone to it than the Fellowship. The Fellowship is like one big story. And then you get to the Two Towers and you got your Merry and Pippin story, you got your Hunter's story, and you got your Frodo and Sam story, right? So
Yeah.
you got 3 things going on, and it kind of continues on into The Return of the King the same way.
I definitely struggled a lot more with this one the first time around, but I mean, eventually I still grew to love it, obviously. And then Return of the King is just,
Is there a more satisfying ending for
no.
fantasy? Like I found The Return of the King just gave me everything, and like Scouring of the Shire is to me the best ending that you could have ever made for the Hobbits.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Um that was, I feel like it really showed that these things like actually have effects on, people after they happened. And I mean, that was that really shocked me the first time I read it as well, because
Well,
that's not what I had really gotten from fantasy beforehand, you know.
well, Tolkien really wanted to give that feel, that reminiscence of World War II,
Mhm.
where
Yeah.
people went away to fight so the war wouldn't come home.
Mhm.
And after everything they did in the war, when they came back to England, the place was destroyed from air raids because the
Yeah.
war still made it home, even though they went away to fight to make sure it wouldn't come home. And
Yeah.
that was what he was trying to do with that moment is the hobbits left the Shire to try and make it that evil did not touch the Shire. They wanted to save the Shire from that happening. But even though they went away and even though they were successful, when they came back, it was still effective hugely.
And off of this book, I remember we had to do a presentation in world history, and we could pick any historical figure we wanted. And I had recently read The Lord of the Rings, and so I picked Tolkien. And I that doing that presentation was like eye opening. It was like crazy for because I love The Lord of the Rings, but I didn't know anything about the man who wrote them, right? So I just learned so much about not only him but also like what influenced The Lord of the Rings, like what he's trying to do with it. So yeah, there was there was just there's just so much more than uh really, I guess, kind of like meets the eye when off of first reading it. And I mean, I definitely, I've, apart from The Hobbit, I've never read any of his other stuff, but I do want to eventually, read Silmarillion, all that other stuff as well.
It's all like his work is pretty fantastic. A lot of it is in letters and notes, uh, a couple chapters here and there of ideas he had that he put into the world.
Mhm.
And so it's a lot of information that he has done throughout the years that are both complete and incomplete. And there's all kinds of information that we get that makes the world so much broader.
Mhm.
So yeah, Lord of the Rings, awesome choice. What is your number one book?
So I agree with you. I agreed with you about Return of the King being, you know, such an incredible ending, and I do think it is one of the best endings in fantasy. But uh, my favorite book of all time. I'm not saying it's necessarily better, but it is. It's so important for me, and it's my favorite book of all time. Is Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows.
Okay,
Um,
yeah.
yeah. So, oh, maybe a little bit of a more controversial pick nowadays.
Hey,
Um,
you know what? Whatever is your favorite
yeah,
gets to be your favorite. That is, it's everything affects us all differently. And sometimes we just read a book that clicks with us
yeah.
in a moment in time in our life that makes everything pretty amazing for us within that book. So, like, yeah, don't feel bad about that being your number one pick. It's an awesome pick, especially if it's the one that made you feel it's the best. And it's obviously the best book for you. So
Yeah.
enjoy it.
Yeah,
Take it.
this is, I mean, it's a very, very satisfying conclusion to, a series um that I've obviously grown up with, and it's the world I've spent the most time in. It has incredible characters. It I just felt so many emotions basically reading this book. And I mean, that's one of the things just I loved about it so much. Like it I mean, it felt like like I almost like knew these people.
Yeah.
Um and I mean, that's all there is to it. Like it's just an amazing conclusion to a series that I've spent just so much time with. And yeah.
I mean,
So
we get that way with any series we read that is especially has more than three books. Because
yeah.
I mean, you get into a series that's got like five, six,
Mhm.
7, 14, 12 books, You spend so much time with characters, you spend so much time in the world that you grow to love it one way or another, because it's something that the more time you spend there, the more real it's going to feel to you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing all of your books today. That was
having me.
fantastic. Anytime. And I know that there's going to be some stuff in the future that we can look forward to, because I know I'm going to be bringing back Tolkien Talk a little bit here within this year. So perhaps I'll have you on for a Tolkien Talk sometime if you're interested.
Yeah, definitely.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, and take care of yourself today.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Start with number 5 and go down.
Hey everyone, today I am joined by Raven Bell Books. Hello, Willow. Welcome
Hey, y'all.
to the show. You're going to give us your top 5 books. So you can go ahead with your first one there and let us know.
Now these are for just 2021, so it's going to be a little different than what I normally would say for all-time favorite. But I guess number 5 was something that I listened to on audio, and it was called "They Never Learn," which was kind of surprising. I just randomly came across it on Scribd. It was like suggested to me, and so I just read it because I was looking for something new, and it was like a thriller, I guess, low-grade thriller, nothing too suspenseful. But it was about, a woman who murders men that act inappropriately, and I loved it. It was a lot of fun. It was really good. I was really surprised that was, one of my top reads of last year, because it's just something that I stumbled upon and hadn't heard about at all. So that was a nice surprise, and I think that's probably why it made to the top 5.
It's always awesome when you can find surprises in the book world.
Yes.
Like you pick one up and you didn't know it's going to hit you the way it hits you.
Exactly.
And those ones make us really excited. So that's
Because
awesome.
all I read are suggestions now. So
Yeah, that's also kind of what I do. I have a big pile of books. Like I got ongoing series, and then basically I being bombarded all the time with suggestions. And of course, I work in a bookstore, so there is like
Yep.
brand new covers that come in of books or titles that just sound interesting and grab you right away. You got to look
Yeah.
at them, and there's all kinds of stuff that just kind of like influence us when we find a book. And
That might be torture.
sometimes they're not that great, but sometimes they're gold, right?
Yeah, exactly. So number 4 was the Midnight Library. Is that, yeah, Midnight
I have
Library.
heard
Matt-
amazing things about this book.
I really love it. Now, I will say it does have the trigger warning of self-harm, but it's one of those where I feel like people will either absolutely hate it if they're in the wrong state of mind to read it. Because I feel like if I read this 10, 15 years ago, I would have hated it. I would have been very cynical and very hateful, probably, with because it is a very uplifting type of story. It's supposed to be uplifting. It's supposed to kind of help you see the best about life, and that you go through things for a reason. So it's a very uplifting type of story. And so I feel like if you're in a good spot, or maybe in the right time of your own healing, that this would be really good. And I feel like that's the people that really love it. But then I also hear other people that just absolutely hate it, feel like it's too mushy, it's too rainbows and sunshine. And I can completely understand that, because I said if I read this 15 years ago, I'd just be like, this is not realistic, because I was in a very different spot in my life that many years ago. So I think it's just one of those, it really depends on you and your state of mind when you read it. But I thought it was really good, and especially since it's so short, it didn't really drag on. It's like 300 pages, I think, not even 300 pages. So like it didn't drag on, it wasn't drawn out, so it's good. I loved it.
I get people coming in all the time saying how much they love it, and it's a hot seller in our store. So
I'm sure. It's very good. So the third one is actually Rise of Empire by Michael J. Sullivan. The
I have
second
heard
of
of
the
this guy.
Revelations. Amazing. Is so good. I'm actually about to read the third one in a couple weeks, but I really love the 2 characters, the duo in them. And it's really lighthearted and fun, and it's very fantasy based, but it's not super serious. Like it's very fun, but it does have serious moments, and I think that's really a good balance between some of these really just thick, heavy books that fantasy is, and it's nice to be able to laugh through one.
I take it that one looks
I really
thick,
love
but
it.
it's not.
It's I mean it's
Like 500 pages?
no, it's actually 750.
750. Oh wow, that's more
Yeah.
pages than I even thought it was.
I mean technically it's two books in one. Like this is what like an omnibus. So like they're bound in three different books now, but it was
Oh.
technically 6 books total.
Oh,
So
okay.
it's like they've put 2 books in one omnibus, this in the second omnibus, and the last
So
two.
they made it a trilogy.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. So it's so you've got like 2 distinct books in this big thing. So it
Okay.
kind of makes you feel like if you want to stop halfway through, you can, because it's literally just an individual book.
Okay.
So that kind of helps too. I think I read something in between it, but I can't remember because it wasn't that good.
I might have to find those and give them a go. I keep hearing good
It's
things
super
about them.
good. And also, if you get Michael J. Sullivan, he's I went to his website, like his personal website, and I think some of his books you can actually get them directly from his website, and he'll even sign them. And like I was looking for, it's a secret because my daughter doesn't know yet, but I got her because she loves the series. This is her favorite series, and she's 16 now. So she's reading the prequel trilogy, and it actually has 4 books in it instead of it used to be a trilogy. I didn't know it had a 4th book.
Okay.
And so I tried to order it for her, and it was $43. And I was like, I don't know if I can do $43 for, a paperback, but I went directly to his website and it was 17 signed.
Yeah.
So she doesn't know that. I just told her that it was too expensive and she'd have to wait. But
If you can always go to the source, go to the source.
yeah, exactly. And that's more money for him too, because it's just directly to him. So we should be getting that here soon. I'll let you know how it turns out, but I'm super excited for it. So
Excellent. You better be
very
posting.
absolutely. Okay, so the number 2 that I had is John Gwynn, Valor.
Phenomenal series.
Phenomenal series. So this is the only one that I got to in 2021. I literally just finished the 3rd one last week, and I'm 3/4 of the way through Wrath now. So they're
So good.
phenomenal. I don't know why it took me so long to finish. Like I keep trying to finish all these things, and this was it was really good because Malice, it's setting up so much stuff, and then this and the rest of the series just kind of carries you through. Like it's
Payoff. Yeah.
super solid. So this is gonna be the year of John Gwynn. I'm sure of it.
I kind of got my dad hooked on John Gwynn.
It's so good. I mean, he's just breezy. I love it.
I was racing him to like finish the series so I could lend him the books. And
Yeah.
he showed up one day at my place and he wanted to take the 3 sequel trilogy.
Oh yeah.
And so he's got that and he's reading that now. And so I'm gonna have to get to that soon. But I also want to do The Shadow of the Gods, because that's a totally different thing on its own, I guess. And
I think it's Norse based too.
It is.
Which I love Norse stuff.
The 2nd book is coming out this year
Mhm.
for that trilogy. So I want to give it a read. And
I'm determined to read Shadow of the Gods before Hunger of the Gods comes out. I
Yeah.
pre-ordered Hunger of the Gods. So that's what I'm waiting on. This year's John Gwynn. It's the year of John Gwynn. I've already decided. Last year was somebody else, which we'll get to. But
all right. Well, how about you go on with your next one there?
so the last one, my top book for the entire 2021 was Dead House Gates by Stephen Erickson. I read this in February last year, and it's still just
Still
right
on
up
your
here. I
brain?
think about this book every day. It's a very emotional, like I feel like with Stephen Erickson, anytime that I'm in the middle of reading his books, like I'll start it and I'm in the middle of reading it, it's not a book that I'll necessarily want to pick up and read. I feel like it puts me in a book slump or a reading slump, which is weird, but I read 6 of his books last year, and 5 of them were in my top list. Like 5 of them were in my top 10.
Wow.
So, and two other ones would have been in my top 5 if I didn't only make myself like, so
Choose
you
one.
can't have
Yeah.
3 Malazan books in your top 5.
Well, actually,
So I
that
just
was
chose one of them.
sort of the issue Callum had when we were talking. Is he mentioned, I don't know where it's going to be at in this picture of videos, but he mentions that if he was to choose top 5 books of all time, it would just all be Tolkien.
Yeah.
So he was like, I can't do it because that's just what it would be. But he said, let's do 5 and 20.
It feels unfair. Yeah.
I mean, it happens sometimes with our favorite series. We find a ton of books in a row. Like, think of like the Popular. I don't know if you got to read that trilogy or not.
It's on my shelf, but I haven't got to it yet.
Phenomenal. Like all
I've
3 of
heard
them,
good things.
each one of them was phenomenal.
Yeah. So like Dead House Gates, it probably took me a good month, an entire month to read this book. And the whole time I'm just like, Lord, like I'm not really feeling it. Like I'm not sure if this series is for me. And then you get to like the last quarter of the book and it just, everything comes together. And it was so emotional. Like I had like a book hangover after reading it. I couldn't pick up anything for like 5 or 6 days after I read this because I just couldn't stop thinking about Dead House Gates.
Don't you hate it when it happens? You
And,
just
and
like
I mean,
can't read anything else.
yeah, like I literally just closed the book and then I sat there for like 10 minutes just thinking about everything that happened. And every single book, one of his books were like that. Like I said, they're all slow. I'm never super excited to pick them up, but when I'm done with them, they're just amazing. And I cannot explain it. It's really weird. I feel like it's kind of backwards. Like I should be excited to read them, but they're just very slow going. It's a very slow burn.
Slow burn books, yeah.
But it's worth it. I don't know. I'm gonna finish reading the series this year. I've only got 4 left.
How many's in the
So,
series?
just 10 for the main series, just 10 main books. And I think Ian Esselmont has several, I'm not sure how many he's got, of like individual stories kind of between these. And then I think Steven Erikson even has started another trilogy for one of my favorite characters in these. He's just now kind of writing. So it's got a lot of books in the world, but the main 10 is what I'm trying to get through first before I start promising myself I'll read more. Because it's a lot of work because they're not easy. They're very dense.
They're not small books.
No.
They're
Oh,
huge.
like these are the big like the trade paperbacks. So they're not the mass market, but these are like 600, 700, 800 pages.
I mean, mass markets are still like thick chunkers.
Yeah, and the writing is tiny. And it's just and everything is just so I feel like it's the exact opposite of John Gwynne. John Gwynne is straight and to the point, and his writing, it's not simple, it's very beautiful, but it flows and it's straightforward where
It's an
Stephen
easy read.
Erikson, yeah, it's easy in a good way. It's in a very good way where Stephen Erikson is it's highly intelligent, high level vocabulary, but everything is so dense that sometimes I'll read something, I'm like, wait, what does that imply? Because then you have to go back and think about what he's implying, not just what he says. So you can't just pick it up and jaunt through it.
I have heard from people that like the first book doesn't seem like much, but once you read the series, there's so much happening in the first book.
Yeah.
Like
The first one I didn't really care for that much.
I find that interesting because like it just means there's always been little seeds planted along the way, and that's really nice.
Yeah, I can tell that the reread factor is going to be huge on this series because, like people said, like he doesn't hold your hand. Like it's just kind of here's the world, figure it out, and like you may not learn what something is until 4 or 5 books down the road, and then by then you're like, I feel like I'm guessing what he's talking about, but then in 4 or 5 books he confirms what you're probably thinking. So you just kind of have to guess, and if you don't understand something, you just have to just realize you're not going to understand because he doesn't tell you, he doesn't explain it. And I can tell, like, if you were to go back after the full 10 books and reread it, I'm sure that I'll pick up so many things that I just didn't understand or didn't know. But I don't think I can reread it super soon. I will eventually, but that's years down the road. So
All right, so that was your top 5.
that was top 5. Yeah.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for coming on to the show and for
Thanks.
sharing your top 5 with us.
Absolutely.
I will have the link to her channel down below. I know that you're a little sparse with your episodes and stuff, but she does have a catalog there you can check out. And
And the hiatus is almost over.
everything's under
So,
construction and will be up and running soon.
absolutely. Thank you so much.
No problem.
Excited.
Thank you.
Face.
Mhm.
Oh. You're recording now.
Hello, everyone. Today we have my admin Erin here with me. She is one of the backbones of my Discord server. Without you, I don't think we'd get a whole lot of conversation rolling because you are a major part of that, and you're also a major part of starting up conversations daily, as well as helping me out just running the server because it is a little bit of a busy place at times. So thank you for coming on and doing this.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm happy to be here.
Excellent. So, Erin, let's go ahead with your first of 5 top 5 books.
Oh, my top 5 of 2021. The first one right off the bat would have to be Tender is the Flesh. I know that that was your favorite too, one of your favorites too.
I think that was my favorite of the year for sure.
Oh, easily.
Yeah.
It was so dark and gritty, and just the tone.
Everything about it was
so well done. Brutal, disturbing. The concept itself is terrifying.
How disturbing it was like the thing that gripped me into the whole story.
Oh yeah, I think one of the most shocking part for me was how easily society was able to distinguish between the humans for consumption that were used for consumption, and then just the normal humans that were going about their daily life, and how free flowing that rhetoric was for your butcher. And
but when you looked at it, when you went into the grocery stores, everything was labeled as special meat as opposed to being called human meat, because they really did try to disconnect people in that world from their food. The people who were closest to the food, which is the people we were following in the story, get to kind of see their dilemma with the way things are working, and is very, very disturbing.
Very disturbing. It was excellent. Excellent.
It was definitely one of the better ones I read this year, and actually probably in the past few years, it's one of my top favorite ones I've read.
Oh yeah, it'll be interesting to see which one can top that in the years to come. I don't know. We'll see.
I don't know. What's your second one?
My second one is going to be Cunning Folk by Adam Neville. I read his The Ritual. I read that one, and it was so good. It's a young family. They move into this house. Next door, they're described as the neighbors from hell. So you're just watching this family as things deteriorate around them. And he does such a great job at giving you this atmosphere. So it's very atmospheric. Go ahead.
I tried to find that book and I can't find it in Canada.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh no.
I'll probably have to order. I'll have to order on like Amazon or something probably.
Yeah. Oh, you'll probably end up liking it. But
it looks awesome.
You're thrown into there.
That cover looked amazing.
Oh yeah.
Like I just put a pig's head on the cover and it's just like it's awesome.
Exactly.
I really love that cover. It made me want to read it just from the cover alone. And of course, me and you have a lot of similar tastes in books we read. Like we seem to cross over quite a bit. So I imagine it's going to be another one of those books I absolutely enjoy too.
Oh yeah. I wrote you as soon as I was done with it. Like, Nick, you got to get this book. This one's for you.
I gotta get my hands on it. I don't know when I'm gonna be able to, but next time I do an international buy, probably.
It's so good. It's worth it. Another one that I had is Adrian Tchaikovsky's Shards of Earth. That's his newest sci-fi to come out.
I've heard of that one.
It's really well done. But I read his Children of Time and was very impressed, so I wanted to pick this one up. It's dealing with these aliens that they're calling architects, because when they go in, they as they destroy the planet, they really reshape it to make it so that it.
I think you froze there, Aaron.
Colonies, and it's this big battle, and that's only in the very first few pages of the book.
I'm gonna have to get you to go back like 5 seconds there because you were frozen.
Oh no, okay. Well, so Shards of Earth, it's about these aliens that we are calling the architects.
Yep.
And they're going to, the reason why they've given them that name is as they go and destroy a planet, they essentially reshape it. And it makes it uninhabitable. So there's this big battle where the humans are trying to fight them off to save the Earth. And they can only get a few of them off the planet in time. And that's just the first few pages of the story, is that very first battle. And so you're dealing with this story where the architects get pushed away. So essentially we won, but the Earth is destroyed. And now all of a sudden down the line, they're resurfacing. So it's going to be, the architects have come back. What are we going to do about it? Are they coming to destroy the next planet that they've all lived on? But it's a found family type story set in space. And found families are like, I absolutely love those. The characters are fantastic. And there is such depth to this story that I'm very excited to read book 2 when it comes out this year. Oh, so if you like space, that's a good one to pick up.
So it's a current series that's running then?
Yes, that's book 1. The Architect series, I believe, is the title of it, The Architects.
Now, I heard from, I think it might have been Neil deGrasse Tyson. He had a very interesting thought, and it was, if aliens were to ever exist within our sphere of our world, like if they were ever to get here, they would actually be robotic as opposed to biological life. And
that's interesting.
So much sense to me, because like the idea that like biological stuff does decay over time, whether we live or not. So with that fact, I was like, interesting. So androids would most likely be the realistic aliens that come for us.
The way to go.
Well, that one sounds very interesting. So what is your 4th book?
Oh, the 4th one, that's going to be Entangled Life. I actually have that one with me. The author is Merlin Sheldrake.
Oh, that's the one about the mushrooms.
Yes, this was our nonfiction pick for, I believe it was April of 2021. I mean, it completely surprised me by how excellent it was. Just the inner workings of the fungi.
Didn't she grow mushrooms in her copy of her book?
I'm not sure.
I think I read somewhere that she had grown mushrooms in her copy of her book when she wrote it. And like, I've seen a picture. Someone did it. I thought it was the author. I've seen the picture, and it had just like mushrooms like coming out around the pages of the book.
Oh, wow. I haven't seen that. I'll have to look.
I don't know. It looked cool. Definitely Google it. You'll see it. You'll see what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I will. It was very well, very accessible. extremely accessible. I don't think there was a page at all that I was confused on, and they go into detail, a lot of detail about like the electrical network, that the intelligence of them, just how vast they are and spread underground that you don't see beyond surface level. That surprised me by how much I loved it.
Their root systems are insane.
Insane.
Yeah. And have you ever seen someone, there's a guy on TikTok, he hooks his guitar up to different things in nature and plays through them. When he hooks it up to mushrooms, the sounds he gets out of it is insane.
Really? No, I'll have to look for that.
Yeah, and there's another guy on there too who also will hook up a machine to it, and it just hears like the signals that they pop out, and it's just like a single sound at a time. So like boop, 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 things like that.
Oh,
Just from the
neat.
mushrooms, like that's just what they're putting off. So it was really cool to see. Mushrooms are very interesting. Fungus in general is a very interesting type of plant life we have around here. And I'm even hesitant just to call it plant life because it lives.
Yeah.
Very, very much like its own thing. It eats, it lives. Like, I mean, I guess plants eat and stuff like that too through photosynthesis, but mushrooms are a bit different. Yeah. So cool. So what is your number one book of the year from 2021?
Oh, this was in absolutely no order whatsoever. So, I mean, the best one, yeesh, I don't know. I couldn't even begin to tell you. They were all so good. But my very last one, like I mentioned before, I'm kind of cheating on it. It's going to be a series in total. It's the First Law trilogy. And I am absolutely saying that is the 3 books in one. It's all one big book. It's all one big book. You can't separate them. The reason being, I read The Blade itself, immediately moved on to book 2, and I couldn't stop. I had to finish book 3 all the way. So I read it all in one go.
Yeah.
They just fantastic characters. Every character in there was absolutely amazing.
Lockton is one of the best characters going in fantasy for sure.
Oh, same.
So
Same.
good.
I loved him.
And was it Logan? Was that the other guy who's in it?
Logan Nine Fingers.
Absolutely love him too. Those were my 2 favorite characters when I read it.
Oh, just the blend of action. There were suspenseful scenes. The humor was superb. So I couldn't stop. I had to keep going.
And it's true dark fantasy, which is really nice. Because like when you hear like dark fantasy, a lot of people look at like A Song of Ice and Fire, which I also grant as one big story. Like it's one story. It just happens to be split in different books. People were like calling that dark fantasy, and I felt like it wasn't quite dark fantasy like what Joe Abercrombie was doing. Because what he was doing was dark fantasy. That was dark fantasy.
Well, he did a great job because he got me to read his entire trilogy in one go without any breaks in between. So he did something right.
He did. I really like Joe Abercrombie. I actually have not finished this trilogy. I've only read the first book and really loved it, and I haven't gone back to it. Sort of like Scott Lynch's Liza Locklamora. I finished the first book, really enjoyed it. I've never read the second or third book yet. And those are series I am intending on finishing at some point in the nearish future. Probably next year, maybe next year. We'll see how this year goes because I'm planning on getting my Wheel of Time all done this year.
Oh, good.
I am on book 9, so there's that, and then we're doing the Dark Tower plus other books. I might be able to get them squeezed in there and do something with them, but it's hard to say. Hard to see.
Well, the audiobook is fantastic too. So if you want to go that route.
I have the audiobooks for them.
Oh, it's wonderful.
Yeah, I'll probably have to. Who does the reading for it?
I'm not sure, but he's absolutely fantastic.
Okay, I'll have to do those that way then. Probably that might be a good way to get them in. It's like
Oh
I
yeah,
usually do 2 audiobooks a month, along with my, physical reading. So probably be able to fit them in sometime.
oh yeah. Well, you'll love it. Either physical reading or the audiobook, you can't go wrong.
Well, I mean, the first one was so good. I still remember it actually very fluently, especially Glocta and his past and his his torturing methods, things like that. It stuck with me, and it's been almost 3 years since I've read it. So
Oh yeah. No, it's time to finish.
yeah, yeah. In saying that, it was also 3 years ago I started Wheel of Time too.
Oh, you're already on book 9. You were tearing through that series.
Yeah, I took a year long. I didn't even read any last year. I took a break between book 4 and then this year I have done Fires of Heaven, Lord of Chaos, and Crown of Swords, all within the last 5 weeks.
Yeah. Yeah, very quick. Every time I see your update on Goodreads, it's always another Wheel of Time book.
Well, it was those ones. I did a Magic the Gathering one there as well, a graphic novel, which was also very good. So, well,
Uh-huh.
good, not very good, but good. It was
Ah,
entertaining, but it was lacking in some ways.
I've never read a Magic the Gathering novel.
This was my first one, so
Uh-huh.
we'll see. Maybe we'll check out some other stuff in the future.
Maybe it's a good starting point.
Well, I play the game, and I'm very knowledgeable on the history and everything like that. Like I've followed the stories that they tell us about while they release the sets. But this one, like, it followed some of that story, but was also lacking from that story as well.
Ah.
Yeah. So I think that's where we'll wrap up the 5 books there you had for us. Thank you so much for being on.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you for inviting me.
Anytime. And we'll definitely be doing more stuff in the future for recordings and stuff like that if you're interested.
Excellent.
Wonderful. Hello. And today with us, we have a journey for the pages. Callum, you're here with your top 5 plus honorable mention. So why don't you start us off with your honorable mention? Go right ahead.
So, honorable mention, no introduction needed. It is Dune.
Excellent.
First time I read this year and blew me away. I absolutely loved it.
It's a really good story.
I was surprised. Like I thought I wouldn't like it because it's like old sci-fi, and I don't tend to like that. But it blew me away, and you can really see how many things it influenced.
Oh, so much. Like if you just look at Star Wars alone,
Yeah.
like it influenced so much of that. But aside from Star Wars, Dune is just an amazing story on its own. Did you watch the movie of it too when it came out?
Yeah, I went to the cinema to see it.
And
We
what'd you
don't
think of
get. I didn't like Timothy Chalamet. I liked the movie overall.
Yeah. I like Timothy Chalamet. I liked him a whole lot better than the guy in the old David Lynch film.
Well, yeah. When you compare those two, he did pretty good.
I'm really excited to see what part 2 brings.
Yeah. To be honest, the second half of the book is my favorite part. So really looking forward to the movie.
I wonder if they're going to continue with the series after the first book. That'll be very interesting to see, because I could totally see them doing like Messiah and Children as one movie, and then you got 4 more movies after. So you got about 6, 7 movies out of the books?
I think I heard they're doing a trilogy. So the first one is Dune Part 1, second one is Dune Part 2, and they're going to make a movie of Dune Messiah.
Okay. I would believe Messiah and Children of Dune would be combined together. There's not
That
a
might
whole
be.
there's not a whole lot in Messiah.
I've not continued on yet. I'm hoping
Oh.
to do that this year, but
Let me know when you
Uh,
get to Children, I'll join you.
oh, awesome. Yeah, because Messiah is quite short, so won't take long. So
Your book number 5.
number 5, I think pretty much nearly everyone has read this.
I have not yet. I have it on my shelf. It's a book I'm very excited to get to. Great.
This, I love this. I've not read any other John Gwynne books.
No,
This is the only one I've read.
the Malice series is fantastic.
I
Like,
own all the other
phenomenal.
books. I own The Four Faithful and the Fallen. I own the Three of Blood and Bone. Is that
Yeah.
what that one's called?
Yeah.
So I own all of them. I've just not gotten around to them yet.
Yeah.
But
Faithful and the Fallen was phenomenal. I am excited also for this one too.
yeah, so I mean,
Yeah.
Vikings.
I think the next one is The Hunger of the Gods.
I've
and that
already
one-
pre-ordered it.
Comes out this year. Yeah, I'm gonna grab that one because is it supposed to be a trilogy or?
Yeah, so it's another
Okay.
trilogy.
I'll probably start reading them near the end of the year, and be ready for the third one. Is what I'll do
Yeah.
because
Um,
I'm currently doing my Wheel of Time.
I've seen that. Yeah, you've read like, is it 5 and 6 you just read?
I've read 5, 6, and 7.
How are you
I
reading them that quickly?
I did Fires of Heaven at the end of December. And then I did Lord of Chaos and Crown of Swords back to back. This month.
I got really, I don't want to say in a rut, but I just did not want to pick up another Wheel of Time book after book 3.
Yeah,
Like-
that's where I was too with book 4. I kind of begrudgingly read it, and then I took a year off, and then
I've not read a Wheel of Time book in at least a year and a half now.
I'm
I
back with
reread
it.
parts of The Eye of the World for the
TV
TV show, but I've
I'm-
not picked up book 4.
I'm back with a vengeance now. I am determined to get it finished. I can tell you, The Fires of Heaven and Lord of Chaos are the best 2 books I have read up to date. Like better than the first 3 books.
Because I hear
So,
most
yeah.
people say book 4 is their favorite.
That was my least favorite. But
Really?
everyone's different, right?
Yeah. But no.
So
Shadow of the Gods, so Vikings, 3 main POVs, and the character Orca is probably one of the best characters I read last year.
yeah.
I don't want to say anything because a lot of stuff happens to her.
That's fair. So what is your book number 4?
Number 4.
Yes, Jurassic Park.
Jurassic
Wonderful.
Park. Now-
Absolutely love that when I read it.
Yeah, and I was lucky enough to get this edition.
I'm jealous, man. I'm not even joking. Like I've been sending Nadia the link to the Folio Society books all the time as like a hint, hint, buy this for me. Because they also just came out with a Lost World one too, right?
Yeah, I've not got that one yet, but that's on my birthday wish list. So. But no, I honestly can't believe it took me this long to read it. It's been one of my favorite movies for about 20 years.
Right.
And this was the first year I read it. So
Yeah.
I was surprised at how different some parts were.
Oh, it's way different than the movie. Like there are so many things changed.
But I mean, it's kind of like Lord of the Rings, where the books are amazing and the movie's amazing,
Yeah.
but they're quite different.
They have their own little worlds on their own.
Yeah. So no, I absolutely love that, and I mean everyone knows what Jurassic Park is. So I don't need to say anything about that.
If you don't know what Jurassic Park is, go out and watch the movie Jurassic Park. You will not be disappointed.
But stop after the third Jurassic Park movie. Don't watch Jurassic World movies.
I
They're
love the Jurassic World movies. Listen, this is sort of the same realm as Middle Earth media. If you give me more Middle Earth media, I'm going to consume it. If you give me more Jurassic media, I will consume it. I love dinosaurs. I've loved dinosaurs since I was a little child, and Jurassic Park has been something that has like been in my heart and soul ever since I was little. I remember that T-Rex scene when he eats the lawyer off the toilet as a child. Absolutely love it, right? So like if they give me Jurassic World, like 10 movies of Jurassic World, I'll watch it because I enjoy it. Hell, I watched the kids show Camp Cretaceous.
no, Camp Cretaceous is amazing.
It's
Like I
awesome,
would tell everyone to watch that.
right? It's great.
I put it on. I put it on for my son, and I watch it more than he does.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Me and the kids watch it all the time. It's just like just give me Jurassic Park and Jurassic World material, I'll watch it. I don't care. Like, yeah, they're not as good, and even the third movie is terrible. I mean, uh, Jurassic Park 3 is pretty bad. I think if you wanted to go
I
with quality, I would say Jurassic Park and then the Lost World Jurassic Park and stop there. But if you're just a fan of dinosaurs, have them all. It's fantastic. Dinosaurs galore.
yeah, all the movies were great, and the book is amazing. Absolutely loved it.
I'm excited to see what I haven't read The Lost World yet, so buddy read.
Yeah, definitely.
When we do that, I'm excited to see what the books have entailed for The Lost World because it's going to be much different, I believe, than what the movies gave us.
Going to be really missing some Jeff Goldblum.
Probably. And so, what is your book number 3?
So this is one we both read this year, or this past year.
Color of Magic. Yes.
So this is still my favorite Discworld book to date.
Really?
Yeah.
See,
I know that is a very unpopular opinion.
No, I thought Color of Magic was fantastic. Not my favorite. I've read up to Witches Abroad, and definitely Mort is still my favorite.
I have to say, I read Mort, and then for Christmas I started Hogfather, and I'm beginning to think the Death books just aren't going to be my favorite.
That's very possible.
I got 100 pages into Hogfather, and I've kind of put it to the side. Like I'm not DNF'd it. I'm going to finish it.
Yeah.
I love every Discworld book I've read. It's just some to different levels, and I think it suffers just from a bit of a slow start.
Series wise, the Witches are my favorite.
I think it's a tie for me between the Wizards and the City Watch.
Okay. I've only read Guards, and I really enjoy that. But like it's just a one-off so far, so I haven't seen more of the series from them. That one's my second favorite like book on its own in the series.
Guards is an amazing standalone book.
It's fantastic. But like I said, the Witches, they're just underperforming as a single books, but all together as a story, as a series, it's the strongest one.
So I think so far my least favorite book is Equal Rights.
Fantastic.
Like least favorite standalone book is Equal Rights. The only thing I really liked about that book was Granny Weatherwax.
She's fantastic, and she only gets better every book.
Yeah, but color magic is just
It's wonderful. Rincewind is such a
a wizard and a tourist.
yeah. It's great, and I really also enjoyed the Rincewind series. Rincewind is a fantastic character to follow throughout.
Yeah, color magic was like I struggle to put it down. It's just it goes from one beat to another, like so fast paced
Also, that
and so
cliff,
fun.
it's the best cliffhanger I've ever read in my life.
There's a reason.
Yeah, it's fantastic. um, so your second favorite book?
So, second favorite, I don't think many people will have read this one. Now, this was kind of an accident. I even read this. I created a NetGalley account in 2021, and I was just going through the list when I first created it and was picking random books that I thought sounded okay. And I picked this one up, not thinking I'd like it, just thinking I want to try some literary fiction and see how I like it. Little did I know it's a mild sci-fi, and it completely blew my mind. I loved it, and it is Bewilderment.
Okay, I've heard of it. I don't know anything about it, but I've heard of it.
So this was a nominee for the Booker Prize this year.
Yep.
And it's a story. It's a father and son story, basically. What it comes down to. It tells you this at the very start of the book. So the mother has died, and the father is really struggling to take care of the son because the son is kind of like a mild special needs, anger management issues, and lots of different things happen throughout it, but it always comes back to the father and son relationship. And obviously, I say obviously, but I recently had a son, and it just like it really got me. This book, like if I was put in that situation, I don't know what I'd do. It was just incredibly well done. There is some people complain because there is obvious political points and environmental issues. Personally, I think they were done really well, but they kind of lean towards my own views. So it'll be a bit of hit or miss for people. But the base story of the father-son relationship is just amazing. And the slight sci-fi element kind of ties into my number one book. It is heavily inspired and even mentions in this book a classic sci-fi book.
Okay.
And the sci-fi element of it is quite similar. But I'm not selling this very well.
How about this? Bewilderment. So it's your second favorite book of the year that you read. Oh yeah, everyone. His top 5 is his top 5 books of the year because his top 5 ever is just all Tolkien. So
yeah.
So Bewilderment. You would obviously give it a 5-star read, I would guess.
If I could, I'd give it 6.
Okay, so if you like sci-fi, book for people who like sci-fi.
If you like, more people will have read my number one book, and if you like that, I think you'll like Bewilderment.
Okay.
It is very mild sci-fi, but it's mainly it is a literary fiction book, so it's not mild sci-fi elements, mild environmental elements, mild political elements. Main element is a father-son relationship.
Okay.
So if you like character relationships, and there is like the father flashes back to his relationship with the mother as well. So it's basically family dynamics,
Okay.
modern day family dynamics,
So
and it's just
a nice family story then. Like not for a family, but about a family.
don't,
Let me
parts
guess.
of it are nice.
It tugs
Parts
at
of it are
your
nice.
heartstrings, does it?
In different ways, yes.
Okay.
But yeah, if you like character-based books, I would definitely read this. Even if you're not a big literary fiction fan, because I wasn't, I would highly recommend this book. It could convert you.
I've looked at it multiple times and thought about picking it up because it's got a beautiful cover. And also, like you said, it was a runner-up for the Booker, so I mean, that generally means it's going to be good. But I just have so many books already that I have to read, so I just
know the
have
feeling.
been like, I'm not even going to purchase it because like it's going to get on my shelf, and I might get to it this year. It might be another year or two. Like, I fully intend on reading every book I got on my shelf, but like, am I going to read it this year, tomorrow? Probably. I'll take my time.
It is quite short, and it is kind of. It seems strange to say this for me about a literary fiction book because they tend to be slower pace and you plod along. But this one, I really struggled to put it down. I wouldn't say it's a fast-paced book, but it really captures your attention, and you don't want to put it down. You just want to keep going.
Yeah. All right. And now, your number one.
Number one, very strange for me, is a sci-fi book.
Flowers for Algernon?
Flowers for Algernon
Algernon.
by
Okay.
Daniel Keyes. This book is incredible.
Yeah.
There's not many books I will say blanket everyone should read. This is one of them.
Okay.
Incredible book. So the main character, Charlie, is retarded. And the whole book follows his journey through being enrolled in an experimental treatment.
1 second here. Just so we're clear, when he mentioned that, he's talking about the mental implications that were used back in the day to describe people who had mental hindrance. So just so people know, he's not just throwing that word around. Oh,
no,
crazy.
it is like the medical term, retarded. Like it is like that word is used in this book. I don't know what that might be a trigger warning for some people.
I just wanted to throw that out there in case.
No, there probably is quite a few trigger warnings for people in this book. So maybe look them up if those things do tend to get to you. But an incredible book, honestly. Like I said, one of the few that I would say everyone should read, and it's hard to say much about it because you uncover so much throughout just reading it.
Yeah.
And
me and Curtis today were talking about when he had mentioned Grapes of Wrath. We were talking about that old writing style that exists within classics that really have changed the dynamic of our modern day society. You'll go and read some of those and be like, whoa, the racism or like the language they're using or this particular, that is because they are a time capsule. Most classics are a time capsule of their period in time and generally reflect that. Because he was actually talking also about the bell jar, which had a person in an insane asylum that we were talking about as well. So it's sort of along the same lines where I guess you said he was in a bunch of like testing.
Yeah, so he he gets enrolled for an experimental treatment, uh, and basically the whole book is structured as diary entries. So because he's enrolled in this treatment, they've said he needs to keep a journal so they can check improvements, like check the journey throughout, how he's progressing. And the writing style actually reflects that. Like how it says he has, I don't know if it comes under mental health issues or learning difficulties. I'm not sure what it would come under, but you actually see the differences in like the way he writes. So like the writing style changes throughout the book to mirror his progression.
Yeah.
So that's what this one I would say definitely read physically. I don't think you'd get the full impact with an audiobook.
Yeah. Send me that title later on in a message because I'm gonna want to find that, throw it in my classic collection.
It's also very short. It's like 200 pages.
Oh, love it. That's a snack.
Especially for you, how quickly you're going through the Wheel of Time books.
200 pages. I do that in a single sitting sometimes. That's how I get through Wheel of Time so quickly. Is I just put in the time. I just do the time. People are like, "You read so fast." I'm like, I spent over like 60 hours reading Wheel of Time, you know, to get that.
Yeah, you got to put in the work.
It's like you just do the time. That's it. It's not like I'm fast or anything. I have a friend of mine, Corey. They are very fast. They are very fast at reading. You give them a book, a 200-page book, they'll be halfway done it on their half an hour lunch break. They do like 100 pages in like half an hour or an hour. It's crazy. It's silly. I wish
I could never do that.
I wish I could. I think I sit around 60 pages an hour.
I think I'm in the 30 to 40 page an hour bracket.
Yeah. It's
If I read any quicker than that, I don't take everything in. It's kind of like audiobooks. I'm kind of 1.5 times speed. I go any quicker than that, I don't take it all in.
I only do regular speed for audiobooks.
I used to do just regular speed, and then I gradually bumped it up, and I find now 1.5 tends to be kind of the speed I talk, so it's easier for me to listen. But
all right, folks. That is
that's not bad.
Callum's top 5
+1.
+1. Thank you so much, Callum, for coming on to the channel. And I appreciate you sharing your top 5 books of the year with us.
No worries. Thanks for having me.
No problem. You have to.
Okay.
All right.
Continue.
Hey guys, I'm here with Curtis. His channel is Deep in the Reads. So his link for his channel is down below if you want to go check out some of his videos. And today he is going to give us his top 5 favorite books. And Curtis, you can start off with your first book there.
Okay, so yeah, my top 5 is basically the top 3 are definitive, and then the rest are kind of like more nebulous. But anyway, the first book is The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath. I reread this recently, and though I was surprised by how judgmental and bigoted the main character Esther Greenwood is, I was really interested in the way that she depicts mental illness, the way she depicts paranoia and serious psychological problems that make her basically hate everyone around her, and the downward spiral and her trying to claw herself back up, find motivation for life, stuff like that. and it's got some of the best prose that I've ever read in any novel. So it's highly recommended, although the content is pretty disturbing. Yes.
I actually have that one in my classics here, so I will have to push that up the list at some point. That sounds very interesting. So what made it one of your favorite books?
I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that she's a creative type, or she's supposed to be. Like, she wants to be a fashion editor and stuff, and just the way that she depicted mental illness made it relatable. Like, I've had, everyone's had their issues. I've never had it nearly as serious as she does, but the way that she writes about it and the way that she talks about feeling persecuted, even though, like, through unreliable narration, you understand that she's not as persecuted as she thinks she is. I don't know. It's written in a very relatable way. Like, when I read it in high school and I had no friends, it really spoke to me.
That's fair. Yeah. And mental health can definitely do that too, where it can make you not perceive things the way they actually are.
There's points where she'll talk about seeing somebody else, and then you realize that she's looking at her reflection. But the person that she's talking about, she talks about them being ugly. She uses like racially disparaging terms, and then she realizes she's looking at herself in the mirror, and then you're like, oh my God, this woman has so many problems. And it's got a lot of controversy recently for being reevaluated and being kind of like, whoa, this Esther character is really, problematic. But I think it's on purpose. I think it goes hand in hand.
Kind of the problem with any classics we're going to come across is it was a different time. It doesn't make it right what they were doing at the time, but what it is that it's all from a scope and point of view of a time where people were not as kind and caring and thoughtful as they are nowadays. And I think that's where we're getting to now.
Yeah, and I do think Sylvia Plath uses the character's bigotry as a way of like showing that she has these paranoid persecution complexes. It's a way that her mental illness manifests, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's
your next book there?
Next book is Grapes of Wrath by John Steinbeck.
I actually thought that was going to be your number one, but
I'm not really doing it in a particular order. I would hold this and the Bell Jar pretty much equal in terms of execution. Yeah, but I really enjoy it because it's a journey book. It's epic in scope. It's like starting out in the panhandle of Oklahoma. This guy who just got out of jail is going back to his family's farm. Everything is ruined. It's like post-apocalyptic. You got like sand everywhere. There's nothing growing anymore. And his family's ready to abandon the farm. They're basically holdouts. Everyone else is gone. All the buildings are abandoned. And they're like, we got to get to California. It's the only place where people are saying there's any jobs. And it's just this grueling trek where they're starting to realize like mega farming is taking over things too. So like there's like these poetic prose breaks where it cuts away from the narrative and it just describes the land for a full chapter. And one of the scenes like that talk about how these mega farms are like when they let their bad oranges fall to the ground or whatever, they spread lye on them so that the people that are starving and passing through can't
get them.
Yeah. And there's scenes where like they try to find ways to come together and combat this economic oppression that they're facing. So you see collectivization and you see like the farm administration starting to come together and try to fix things. And they realize obviously that California isn't all it's cracked up to be either. It's all worker exploitation, and very politically awakening for me when I was a kid.
John Steinbeck is a phenomenal author. When I was in university, we read Of Mice and Men, and that was phenomenal. He really seems to have a good grasp on the working people. I really want to know a little bit more about his background, so I'm gonna have to take a look into that later on, because I can only imagine he wasn't rich growing up, because he seems very humble in the stories he writes.
Yeah, there is like this rugged masculinity to him too, and that kind of might not suit some readers. I kind of like the way that he does it personally, but yeah, this like Grapes of Wrath and East of Eden are his two for me that are just like crowning achievements.
I've heard really good things about East of Eden as well.
Okay, yeah, that one's about a guy trying to start his own farm basically, and
He does a lot of farming stuff.
mhm. He's got like this dream of like having his own perfect plot of land, but he's got like serious family issues with his brother. There's like this biblical parallel to the Cain and Abel story. Yeah, I really like John Steinbeck.
He's great.
hmm
What's your next book there you got?
Next book is A People's Tragedy by Orlando Figes. It's a history of the Russian Revolution from, yeah. Aaron's reading it right now.
I was gonna say, didn't you read that recently, like last year?
This one I read before we reconnected actually. I did start getting back into the audiobook. But it's enormous. Like I know it's only like 900 pages, but the print is super tiny.
900 pages is still a lot of pages of books.
Yeah.
Book, right?
hmm And to date, it's the only book I've read on the Russian Revolution, so it was quite the introduction. But Orlando Figes writes in such a narrative way. Like the first like 200 pages of the book is all anthropological. It's just establishing the culture of Russia. It talks about the aristocracy. It talks about the royal family. It goes like down into the muck with the peasants. It talks about how grueling their life is in these like mud huts where like the life expectancy is like 40 years if you're lucky. Everybody is always drunk. There's like this church hierarchy that's kind of like out in the country that's kind of mixed with these offshoot folk traditions. So it's kind of like a weird amalgamation of all these local religions combined with Orthodox Christianity. And then it all coalesces into like around page 300, the revolution starts, and it's like absolutely like pedal to the metal. It gets so brutal. The violence gets so insane by the end of it. It's absolutely epic.
Overthrowing the czars, right?
Sorry, say again?
It's about overthrowing the czars, right?
Yeah. It's the Tsar Nicholas II and them getting overthrown and
it's also the whole story with Rasputin and everything too, right?
Yes, Rasputin's story is included in this.
Yeah, because he was a major part in the downfall of the royal family with being connected to the people.
Yeah, that was mostly like a big press blunder. So it was one of the many things that sort of sullied the vision that everyone had of the Tsar. But there were lots of other things too. Like there was a famine that was handled really poorly. There was the Russo-Japanese War.
Russia and famines, they love to famine out their opponents.
Yeah, like I want to read about the Holodomor in the 30s, like the Ukrainian famine. I think like over 10 million people starved to death in that one. So
it was 1 in every 3 people admitted to cannibalism.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
so there were still people who didn't admit to it. So there's a lot more people who did it because Russia really did at that juncture for Ukraine made it that they had no food at all. Like they eat their pets, and then after the pets, it was as people were dying. So it was pretty dark. Russia, they don't pull any punches. They just go straight for the jugular.
And you could see why people in Russia would turn towards socialism and Marxism, given the fact that a lot of the things that saved people during the famine in 1891 was communal getting together and finding ways to share wealth and share food and resources. And it worked out really well. And it actually turned certain people in the aristocracy onto the peasant side, including Prince Lvov. So yeah, it's very interesting to see how things cascade and how ideas form when there's such extreme conditions.
Right. And I think we're going to be pulling up into a new situation here soon because Russia has currently in the world been building up their military on the Ukrainian border and also Swedish border too.
I hadn't heard about the Swedish border. That's interesting.
That
Yeah.
started yesterday.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Wow.
talk later on that. Yeah, so your next book.
My next book is The Rape of Nanking by Iris Chang. Speaking of incredibly disturbing, this is the most upsetting book that I have ever read. And the photographs in it, you look at them and you wonder if they should be illegal. That like they stay with you in your nightmares, man. Like this book is absolutely not for the faint of heart. Obviously, from the title, it's not. But yeah, invasion of China by the Japanese army prior to World War II. Yeah.
Yeah, that would have been brutal stuff happening
Mhm.
because they really did not have any kindness towards each other leading to that. And I remember it was so bad that once the Canadians and Americans and British were involved, it was we got to see firsthand what was happening because we had POWs in their camps being treated the same way that they treated the Chinese when they took over too. So there was definitely a lot of bad stuff that happened during that. War is ugly.
Yeah.
Isn't this also part of the reason the Japan's invasion of China? Isn't that part of the reason for the Geneva Code?
I think it might have been part of it. I'm pretty sure the Geneva Convention stuff was written just after World War II, right?
Yeah. It was after it ended because there was like so many atrocities made during it that they were like, listen, we need to have rules of war and these things cannot happen again because they were, because like the problem is in war, if you push too far one way, the enemy's just going to try and push even harder the other. And that means that eventually it's no holds barred and who knows what can happen. And
yeah,
war is ugly enough as it is without having all the nasty parts of it.
Yeah. And the invasion of Nanking, the sack of Nanking was kind of a historical blind spot in the West. Like not a lot of people were aware of it. It's kind of like the Eastern Front or even more obscure because it's just Japanese versus Chinese. And if it doesn't have Americans, usually the West doesn't really hear about it as much. But Iris Chang took enormous personal risks in bringing this book to a English-speaking audience, and she got harassed for the rest of her life by Japanese nationalists to the point where she even took her own life within a few years of this book coming out because the harassment was just incessant.
The whole entire Eastern Front was a mess. It was no less important than the Western Front of the war. And it was probably just as disturbing.
Yeah.
And that's saying something because, like, we had the Holocaust on that side, as well as Russia doing all the things it did after it kind of took hold of all the Eastern Europe. Like, there was just so much done in that war.
Yeah.
It held a heavy toll even to this day. And we're how far out from it? Like 80 years or something?
And Japan still won't acknowledge the atrocities it carried out against China and other countries in the area.
Yeah.
And the Pacific War is the Pacific Front of World War II for me is the most complex part of the war. I can't wrap my head around all those little islands they're bouncing around on. So I think The Rape of Nanking is a really good introduction to it, to what Japan's motivations were for imperial conquest of the Pacific and all that stuff, and the consequences of their racial conquest of the area.
Consequences of their actions.
Yeah.
All right. What's your next one you got there?
Well, the final book is kind of in my nebulous top of books zone. It's Akira by Otomo Katsuhiro, again Japanese, and again relating in some small way with World War II. So it's a post-apocalyptic manga where it's so much post the apocalyptic point that they basically rebuilt all these futuristic hyper cities but there's still this huge class stratification where you've got like these imperialist nationalists at the very top echelons of society, but then at the bottom you've got like these really gritty, dirty bike gangs where violence is the only commodity, violence is the only way to raise your station in life. You see what their school life's like and all that, but then there's all these like twists in the story. So like one of their friends from this bike gang gets into this crash because of this really weird kid with obviously some kind of strange powers. And because of his encounter with this kid, the government basically chases him down and abducts him and leaves his friends wondering what's going on. And there's just so many twists and turns. It turns into this really dystopian science fiction thing where it's about experimenting with human abilities. And again, the violence of the streets rises to the violence that basically takes over the city. And there's all these huge left hooks and right turns in the story where you just get absolutely gobsmacked by the risks that Otomo takes with the story. Yeah.
Very good.
Mm-hmm.
I gave that one partial of a go.
Yeah, and it's fair. I'm fine that you don't like it. I know it's definitely not everyone's cup of tea.
I might have to return to it someday. We'll see.
Don't feel pressured though. If you weren't into the early parts, it's okay.
I'm just not a huge graphic novel person. Like, it has to be the right one to grip me, right?
Okay.
And, it's something that I've also always been willing to go and try again because I find graphic novels are not that much of an investment. They're not a time
Yes.
investment. They
Yeah.
take little to no time to do. Like, I was doing that one partial in and out at work when I had a little bit of free time. Because I often do that with graphic novels. I'll read like 2 or 3 pages and go about my day and continue on, and then another day I'll do another few pages.
And I will say there are some things that I find fault with Akira. I really prioritize characterization in storytelling, and I find most of the characters are quite flat. The only ones who aren't, in my opinion, are Tetsuo and the general. I think that they have pretty interesting character arcs. Akira as well, the titular character, is pretty interesting. But I think that the story concepts, the pacing, the action is so compelling that it sort of overshadows the issues I do have with some of the writing and characterization.
I mean, I think in all of our favorite types of books and stories, there's always problems within them that we can overlook. Like, as you know, I'm a huge Tolkien fan. I can overlook his writing style for the story and information he has. And so that is why it stands out so much to me, as opposed to other people who will look at his writing and probably get turned off by it, because the man was never a writer.
Right.
He was a linguist and a historian. Like, that was his skill set, and that's what he brought to the table. So sort of like, with these situations, for instance, the things you find that you have problems with Akira, I think we all overlook a lot of issues within our favorite stuff in order to truly enjoy it, because there are things about it that we're just willing to go, you know what? It's a little problem. It's not a big deal compared to the grand scheme of things.
Right. It's only a problem that you notice after you're done. Like, in retrospect, you're like, oh, well, but when you're in the moment, you don't even really think about it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think Akira is a really good place to start with Japanese manga. I think it's like there's multiple different versions, and if you're not used to reading right to left, there are versions where it's left to right and it's in full color. So
that's one of the things I don't like about mangas.
Oh, well, it has a version that's written left to right.
That was the one I read.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. The one I was reading had it read like a regular book.
Okay.
Yeah. The whole swap around, it messes me up.
Yeah. It's funny because I have friends who are like so into manga that the comic that they're writing is read right to left. I'm like, that's not going to fly in a Western market. I'm sorry.
That's
But yeah.
well, sometimes they do. A lot. You know what? I see a ton of teens coming in and buying mangas.
Yeah. That's when I was into manga too.
Crazy. It's crazy the amount of kids who come in and buy mangas. And they're also among some of the cheaper books that are sold as well. They're like 13 or 14 bucks.
And I still find that unaffordable. Like, as you might have noticed, Akira is the only book here that I don't own. I find it like, because a manga is only like 150 pages and you breeze through it in like half hour. And it's like, I spent $15 for a half hour.
There are Akira omnibuses now.
Yeah. And they're pricey as hell.
Yeah. But, I mean, it depends if you want it or not, right?
Yeah.
You use other resources, I take it, to get used.
Yes. Yeah, I read all my comics and manga online. Yeah.
Right on. Well, everyone, go check out Curtis over at Deep in the Reads. Link is down below, and we'll see you with the next one.
Thank you very much for having me, Nick.
No problem. See ya.
Bye.
We go. Welcome, everyone. Today we have my friend Erin with us, and she is going to give us her top 5 books of all time. So, Erin, go ahead with your first one.
All right. Well, if anyone who's ever spent 5 minutes with me will not be surprised at all that my first one is going to be The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien.
Love that cover.
Yeah, well, see, this is the reason I picked this, because I was torn between picking The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings, which is one book in 3 volumes. But when I was a kid, I was like an advanced reader, and they were having a hard time finding stuff for me to read because what I was able to read, the content was too mature for like a 10 or 11-year-old. So finally, my mom goes, you know what? Give this a shot. You might like this. I've had this for years. Handed it to me. I didn't read it for like 2 years. And then we were going to my grandparents for Christmas one year, and I needed to pick a book. I said, oh, I'll just bring this. So 4 o'clock in the morning, Christmas morning, I woke up, couldn't get back to sleep, super bored, started reading this, and then they had to come get me to open presents because I was into it. And that is just what started the whole thing. So this is my mom's book, technically. I've just been borrowing it for almost 25 years.
Yeah.
She hasn't asked for it back. So it is illustration by J.R.R. Tolkien on the front. Comes over to the back, and he has a note there that the moon shouldn't be full, that he drew it wrong.
And is that why you read it every Christmas?
It is, yeah.
Oh,
it's every December I read it.
Yeah, that's really cool.
And I don't always read this particular one because it's starting to feel a little bit old, and so I'm a little bit leery of traveling with it. So I do have a few different versions of it. So I just pick one, and I always bring that to my parents' place for Christmas.
Oh, nice.
So it kind of stands in for The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings. And I figured I could cheat because they're so often sold as a set of 4 these days. But it's really just like, I love everything that Tolkien's ever written. I own most of it. And like some of the books, I got multiple editions of them, some vintage ones, some, limited edition ones. So this is forever my number 1.
Excellent.
So my number 2, I'm gonna hold this up here. This is an edition of the Iliad, and it is, I don't know if you'll be able to see that there, but it is in the original ancient Greek. So this is books 1 to 12. I do not have books 13 to 24 because my aunt bought this for me at a secondhand store. Like a secondhand bookstore, and she actually had to argue with the very snotty salesperson who didn't want to sell it to her because it was written in ancient Greek.
So I take it you can read ancient Greek?
What's that?
You can read ancient Greek?
I can, yes. I have a classics degree, and I did 4 years each of ancient Greek and classical Latin. So I love all things Homer. I also have, Penguin Classic edition of the Iliad, but it's a prose translation, not a poetry translation. It's not my favorite, but I kind of have it. And then I've also got my Loeb editions of the Odyssey. which gives you the Greek on one side and the
Oh,
English on the
on the
other.
other. Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah, love that. Love Homer. Translated parts of both poems during my degree, and I still like to do it for fun. So this and the story behind it, and my aunt not really knowing what my degree was entirely all about, but knowing that this was something I would really enjoy and getting it for me for Christmas, just makes me love it that much more.
That's amazing.
So my third,
That's something special though.
it is, yeah.
Yeah.
I've never, anytime I go into a used bookstore, I always keep my eyes open for that book 13 to 24. So far, no luck.
Someday I hope you find it.
Yeah. So number 3 is Jonathan Livingston Seagull,
Okay.
by Richard Bach. This book is kind of an in-joke in my family. So it's about a seagull named Jonathan.
Okay.
And he breaks away from the pack and likes to fly really high and do different dives and have lots of adventures. And so he is disowned by his flock for breaking the mold. So the first half is his life on Earth, and then the second half is his experiences in heaven. And there are lots of amazing pictures of seagulls.
That's
Just-
awesome. I have never heard of that book before.
Like literally black and white pictures of seagulls. It's great. It's a short book. You can read it in one sitting, maybe two if you want to do it like part 1 and part 2. I've read it tons of times. It's my mom's favorite book. And all of my aunts, whenever somebody posts a picture on Facebook and if there's a seagull somewhere in the background, somebody's going to write Jonathan in the comments. So it's great. Just a classic. And yeah, I don't want to say not a lot of people know about it, but you don't really hear it talked about
I've
when
never
people
heard
talk
of it.
about like, classic books.
Yeah.
So yeah, love that one. And number 4
Number 4.
is also kind of representative of a genre, but it is, I think, my favorite of the genre. So this is No Great Mischief by Alistair MacLeod. He is from Nova Scotia, lived in Cape Breton.
Okay.
And so this is representative of the Canadian literature genre, which I fell in love with when I took a CanLit course in high school. So this book is about a family in Cape Breton. So they are a mining family, and they are particularly trained in a type of really dangerous mining. So their skills are very much wanted across the country. So you have the group of brothers that travels out to Ontario, and they're sort of headhunted by different companies that want them to do this really dangerous mining. And then there's also a set of twins that leave Cape Breton and just go have their own adventures, but you can never really leave home, and home finds them no matter where they are, which is really the theme of the book. But Alistair MacLeod will reach into your chest and rip out your heart and throw it on the ground and stomp on it, and then toss it back to you over his shoulder, and you will say, please do it again. It's just
So-
like, no one breaks my heart like this man.
So he's a very convincing writer then.
And he also did not write very much, and it took him a really long time to write, and he never edited.
Oh,
Did not edit. Would take a week to write 2 sentences. This has never been rewritten or gone over. It took him
Oh.
so long, and it was perfection, and it is.
nice.
Bonus one, Strange Heaven by Lynn Cody is my other CanLit favorite. My mom and
Okay.
I have a million in-jokes about this book, and it almost got into that slot, but it's like the bonus.
Okay. The bonus one.
That one takes place between Cape Breton and the IWK.
Oh, okay.
A girl has a teenage girl has a child out of wedlock and is an inpatient at the IWK. And it's all about her recovery and then coming back home to her small town who knows all her business.
Sounds like Nova Scotia.
It's so Nova Scotia, it hurts. Yeah. So 5th, not last, these aren't, aside from The Hobbit, I don't think these are in any real order of preference. But I have Good Omens by Neil Gaiman and Terry Pratchett.
Phenomenal.
The reason I chose this, aside from I love it, I've read it multiple times. I want to marry both of them. I couldn't pick a Terry Pratchett book and I couldn't pick a Neil Gaiman book, and they're both two of my favorite authors. And I said, you know what? Why
You
not the
can
book that they
combine them
both
together.
And if you've read enough of each of these authors, you can pick out in this book who wrote what paragraph. You'll be reading along and you're like, that is, oh, that was Terry right there. That's
Well, Neil Gaiman is more punny, and Terry Pratchett is more what would the word be? He's less punny, but more chaotic with his writing, right?
like chaotic good.
Yeah, he does a lot of like really out there ideas, and Neil Gaiman does that too, I suppose. But like, I found Neil Gaiman, when I read him, he was always super punny and just like intellectual that way. But I
Yeah.
found Terry Pratchett to be like more thoughtful in some of his stuff. Like he's a little bit deeper.
Yeah. And like this being a work of satire, some of the satire is pretty obvious, but then some of it is so subtle that you don't notice it until the second or third time you read it, and you're like, wait a second, that was smart.
I have Good Omens here. I need to read it.
Oh, you're gonna love it. It's
Yeah.
so good.
Oh, I know I'm gonna love it. I just need to make time for it. I got the white cover of it with the what's his face on it, the demon
Crowley.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love both of them for different reasons. And what I really like is when they made the TV show, which I haven't seen, but I've read quite a bit about it. And they said that they were going to play them as if they're a little bit in love.
They did, and it was phenomenal.
And I love that because I kind of got that from the book a little bit. It wasn't specifically in there, but once they start doing favors for each other, like, oh, I'm doing a possession up in London. Do you have anything you need done in the area?
Yeah.
It's like these, yeah, they
Really,
may
really
not be in love,
close.
but they love one another.
Yeah.
And
Well,
that
in the show, they did a phenomenal job at it, and plus they had two phenomenal actors playing Crowley and Azrael, so it was really great.
Yeah,
highly recommend it. You haven't seen it, you need to watch it. I mean,
I know, I just need to get access to it somehow.
It's phenomenal.
Yeah.
There was a scene where the car blows up or something,
Yes.
Crowley's car, and they were directing David Tennant. And David Tennant was standing there, and the director said, I want you to look at it like the TARDIS is blowing up. And he went, got it.
Gotcha.
And that's how he got his little scene of the way he looks at his car being destroyed.
It's like when they told Christopher Lee to imagine what it was like being stabbed in the back, and he said, I don't need to imagine.
I already know the sounds.
Yeah.
You schooled Peter Jackson on it. So good. So those are your top 5.
There they are. I mean, I could have easily done a top 10, but I think that condenses it down pretty well.
Well, that's pretty good because I got about 10 people, 10-ish people who are going to be on here. And if we did top 10 for everyone, it's going to be a long video.
It'd be a very long video.
Yeah. So thank you so much for coming by and doing this with us. That was fantastic. And I'm so happy to see your top 5 there. There was actually a few books I've never even heard of. So very looking forward to hearing more about them.
I'm looking forward to seeing everybody's top 5s and making my TBR list even longer than it already is.
Holy smokes. I know, right? Like that is kind of the plus and the curse of this whole thing is learning of all these titles that I may or may not have read, and now I'm going to need to read some of them.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Hey, everyone. welcome here today. I got Horribilis Goblin, aka Kylie.
Gremlin.
Gremlin. Oh shoot! I just called you a goblin. I'm sorry. Gremlins are way cuter. What is your top 5 books look like?
Okay. So the first one I put down was No Exit by Taylor Adams. Mostly because I read that in like October of like I think 2019. And then right after that, year and a half long slump. Nothing could top it. And I still think about it every day. So that's really my first choice.
Taylor Adams, I notice them all the time in my store and keep thinking about picking up No Exit because it seems to constantly be one of those top selling books. It's in our 2 for 15 section right now. So I might have to grab that and read it. Was it you said you just constantly think about it? Like
I do. Yeah, because when I read it, I read it in 2 days, which for me is like really fast, especially if it's, with my eyes. I read it digitally. And I just remember the whole time as soon as it started to pick up in the beginning that like my whole body was like tensed up the whole time until the cutoff happened. And then I just remember like feeling that kind of like release, like, okay, it's all done. And everybody's fine. And like we can relax. It was just such a thrill. Like it was a true thriller in my opinion, which I loved.
excellent. So what is your next book on the docket there?
I put Junji Ito's Cat Diary. It was so wholesome. As a person who has 2 cats, I just related so much to it. And I think other cat owners could really, really understand what I mean.
So it's a good book for people who have cats because there's all the little idiosyncrasies of
Well, yeah.
cat ownership in it.
Well, it's basically just like his experience with like moving in with his wife and fiance for the first time, and she has 2 cats and he's never had cats. And like it's just his typical style with just humor, like cat people humor. And it's just really great is really all that is.
I got Bilbo sitting over there, so when they're cats, I was kind of looking over at him, he's laying in the sun.
Yeah, that one's really good and it's really short too. So
okay. And what is your next book you got there?
I put The Midnight Library, actually.
Ooh, Matt Haig.
Yes. By Matt Haig. I liked it. I saw a lot of myself in it. Kind of depressing if you've read it, but it was sort of therapeutic for me. So
I have not read this one, but
that's okay.
I know lots of people who have. It's an extremely popular book, and I have not heard anyone say it was a bad book yet.
I heard, well, Aaron said it was okay, but I will leave it there. But I haven't heard other than that anything bad about it. I know my library has like, I don't know, like 50 copies, which is insane for Idaho. But and they're still all being cycled through all the time. I really liked it. I wouldn't say that it was necessarily like a 5-star. I've been reevaluating my ratings lately. But it's definitely high up there for me, especially with recently coming out of that long slump I told you about.
Yeah.
It's just been really refreshing to read some stuff that I kind of relate to a little more.
I've also been changing up my rating system and being a little bit harder on books, but I always usually I try to be positive as I can be, which is why I used to rate them so high. But I'm trying to rectify that.
It is hard because you go all or nothing sometimes.
Yeah. What's your next book there?
I have 2 that were kind of like a toss-up that I also recently read. The one that I have down for like number 4, even though it's no particular order, is Slewfoot. Just read that recently.
I really want to read it. Like
you should.
You guys have gotten me excited. I almost bought it back in October.
When I have the money, I'm definitely getting my own copy. I really liked it. There's like art in the middle of it that's really good. I really want my own copy. It was so good.
Books that have art in it.
I really liked slew foot because it just made me feel super empowered as a woman, I guess. So
I have heard nothing but good things about it. So I mean, I'm really excited to read it at some point.
yeah, that one has really good characters.
And the cover looks really nice on it too.
Oh, it's nice.
And what's your fifth and final book?
The fifth one I put I don't know how to pronounce it. It's French. It's Chouette by Claire Oshetsky. It's the one, I don't know if you remember back in like December, the one about the person who gave birth to an owl. I mentioned it. I have the
I think
book right here. Let me grab it. This one.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that one. That one
That's a
I put
beautiful
down.
cover, by the way.
It is, and the dust jacket's really nice feeling. But I liked this one a lot because it's just really about like the struggles of like being like a mother in society and the way that all those different expectations that's placed on you. And I'm a mom, so I read it and I understood it. I know that I convinced somebody else to read it, and they were not a parent, I guess. And they didn't really understand it. They thought it was kind of weird, but I got it. So
Sometimes experience makes up for a whole lot when reading a book.
yeah, especially when you go straight from like mother to woman birthing a human owl hybrid. There's a little bit of reading between the lines there.
There's a little bit of stretching you guys.
Yeah.
But like generally with being a parent while reading a book about being a parent, kind
Yeah.
of really can, strike you in ways that someone who is not a parent will never understand.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. I don't have a lot to say. Most of my favorites, I guess, all just like they're based on like my personal experiences and the way that I feel while I'm experiencing the story. So that's kind of the direction I went with picking my top 5. And actually, I know we had to reschedule a lot. I had a few different ones on there, but I've since read some, so I'm like, I'm going to change them.
Hey, that's fair. And you know what? I've been saying this the whole time along through all of these. We have had very few to no repeats of books.
Really?
Yeah, I believe Lord of the Rings was the only one that's shown up twice.
Oh, okay. I've never read it, so.
But everyone else, like a bunch of people have who I've interviewed, and yeah, everyone here has had different books, which is really nice to get that spread of love for different authors and stories. And also, once again, like different experiences can also draw in different stories and make them special to you. So
Right. Mhm.
yeah, that can definitely lend to that big time.
For sure.
Well, thank you so much, Kylie, for coming on and sharing your top 5 books with us.
Yeah, absolutely.
This was amazing. We'll have to do more videos.
For sure.
Okay, bye.
Bye.